Good evening, guys. Good evening, Alan. Good to
How
see
you
you
doing?
again.
Yeah, you too, mate.
I see on YouTube popped in before 4 minutes before 6, so that was a while ago. And Fire Dr. Ninja Turtle. Good to see you again, Daryl. We wait a couple of more minutes and see if there will be more people who joining us.
Yeah, so you were saying it's quite warm in Sweden just now. It's not so warm
Yeah,
in Scotland at the moment, but the south of England is definitely still getting a bit of a heat wave, I think.
yeah,
And yeah, we're just not used to it, I don't think. Sleeping in the heat, it's terrible.
it's terrible. You're just laying all night and sweating. Barb G is on your side.
Hi, Barb.
Today's topic is the remote backcountry flash flood canyon trap.
Yeah, very dangerous situation to be in.
Actually, it happened,
It
and
happens all the time.
people have actually died from it.
Yeah, definitely. It's I mean, flash floods generally are probably underestimated for their danger, I think. You know, a lot more people die from them than I think people think.
Yeah,
You know, yeah, be a good topic. I've actually seen a canyon flash flood take place before, so it was interesting to see that in real life. A very narrow canyon, um, and I've seen some similar flash floods take place across Europe, and I've even seen some here in the UK as well. So yeah, it's the power of water is pretty incredible.
yeah, especially in US in their canyons, it's dry basically, and those floods just
Appear out of
they
nowhere.
just pop up like in a second.
Yeah,
You get no warning.
yeah. Yeah, those places, Arizona, Utah, those kind of canyony type places, those are, got a high predisposition to being
Videos.
caught up in a flash flood. You know, um, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like I say, I think people just underestimate just how dangerous they are. Do you know more people in the US die from flash floods than they do of hurricanes or tornadoes? You know,
Yeah,
I think it's something like 50 or 60 people a year just in the US die from flash floods. And globally, it's massive. You're talking somewhere between 5 and 10,000 people a year die
yeah,
from flash floods. Not all in canyons, of course, but um, canyons exacerbate the matter to a point from an individual point of view because it's channeling the water down a very narrow sort of space. And if you find yourself in there, it's quite hard to escape. I mean, those canyons are only there because water flows through them. That's the thing people forget. The water has cut through the rock in a lot of places over time, and those what might just be a little stream or sometimes a dry riverbed once or twice a year, or maybe even once just every few years, that becomes a raging torrent, in a matter of minutes.
hey, Budflies, good to see you. Hey, evil girl, good to see you.
Hi, evil girl. Well, happy birthday, by the way, from yesterday, I think it was.
Okay.
I'm very slow at catching up on the chats. Some of these people are in the Discord chats and that. I dip in and out now and again to see what's going on, but I'm usually behind with the chat.
Yeah, I sent the link, yours, to your IG, so yeah, he got it, so that's good. But anyway, those floods can happen anywhere. It's not in US. It can be here, even here in Sweden as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, the majority of flash flooding happens in Southeast Asia. Places where they have um, monsoons and things like that. Suddenly, a small riverbed can become a raging torrent, and
yeah,
those and because those places are usually quite packed from a population point of view, that's where you see the vast majority of the deaths in the world take place. But places with these very deep canyons, like in the US or a few places in Europe, they've got them in Spain. I've seen one take place in Spain. They've got a couple in Italy, and those kind of narrow canyons or gorges, which lots of places like Sweden, the UK, and other places in Europe have got those. The water can suddenly, just appear out of nowhere, like you say. It's not like a gradual rising of the water. It can sometimes just be like an absolute torrent.
it comes all at once at the
Com-
same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
Yeah,
not just
what you were
it's not really just the
describing
water.
is they have, this is mostly out in like the desert regions of the U.S.
Yeah.
But what you're describing is called an arroyo.
What do they call it?
It's an arroyo.
Right. Is that just a word that
I forget?
describes
Like I
it?
said, I forget what the. I know it's Spanish. I'm not sure if it's like Spanish for like rapid river or something like that. But yeah, what you're describing is an arroyo. The old place I used to live out in Colorado. So I used to live out in the eastern plains of Colorado. I lived on what was called 100-year floodplain, and we would get those. We would get like those monsoon rains out there, where we just like one moment ground's dry, and the next moment we got standing water. In fact, we got like a rushing torrent of water. I mean, there were a few times, even when I was a kid, when I was like 8 years old, I remember when we had some massive. I'm surprised we didn't get any floods. I'm not going to lie, but like we had some like massive rains that were just overfilling all the bar ditches alongside the roads. In fact, even washed out some of the people, like the neighbors' driveways. That's how bad it was. But yeah, no, yeah, flash floods. It's probably some of the most, I guess, under-respected, least understood type hazard, as far as the general public at large. You got people that think that, they see a little bit of water rushing across, the top of the water surface might seem a bit placid, but underneath the current, there's a little bit of an undertow. And like, what is it like? It takes like something like only 6 inches of rushing water to knock somebody off their feet. 6 inches. That's approximately 15 centimeters for anybody else that doesn't use freedom units.
Yeah.
And it takes approximately 12 to 18 inches of rushing water to wash either a car, a pickup truck, or a small SUV off of the road, off the surface of the road, actually carry it away.
That is not much water to do that.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of feet of water will pretty much move anything. I mean, just 2 feet of moving water will move a building. It'll move a semi. It'll move anything. It's water's quite an impressive force, and it's not just the water itself. The thing about flash floodings is things get carried in water.
Yeah.
So you've got branches and rocks and debris and all that kind of stuff, and that can become, in some cases, just as much as a hazard. I think we have
some videos. I've seen some videos over there in England where it's like there were some towns over there, like just what we would refer to as like the downtown, city center of a small town. I'm watching these towns that they're getting turned into a violent version of Venice, Italy, in like a moment's notice.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely happens, and there's lots of reasons probably why. I mean, a lot of those towns, they've experienced flooding before, but I mean, there's an argument to say that it's probably getting worse now because, the urbanization of our towns. There's more concrete. There's there's less places for the water to go. It ends up just running off into like one big area and all gets funneled down into a small stream or something. So the drainage becomes a bit of a problem. There's a lot less farm fields and stuff like that, and growth, natural growth that can withstand a lot of the flooding. We don't really have much in the way of like beavers and things controlling our waterways like we once did back in the day. And of course, you'll always get people who mention sort of global warming, where whenever the weather does something that's not perfectly what they expect it to be, they attribute that to global warming, which may or may not be the case. But we definitely get wetter winters in the UK. That's what's been observed.
Hey,
over
Verna,
the past
good to see you, man.
years. And most people, by the way, in flash floods tend to die in cars, from what I understand.
Yep. That's exactly what it is over here. That's where they find most of the flood victims, the drownings. Hell, I watched a video on Instagram a couple of years ago. This guy, he had a lifted up SUV. I don't remember what it was. I don't know if it was like a Toyota Land Cruiser, what it was. He has snorkel on it and everything. Got big beefy tires. Got some good ground clearance, but there are people that were already smart enough. They stopped in the middle of the road. I don't know if this was in South America or where the hell this was at, but everybody had stopped in the middle of the road, stopped their pickup trucks, stopped their cars in the middle of the road. They weren't crossing where this torrent of water had already formed, was just violently rushed across the road surface. This guy, I guess he thought that he was invincible enough that he would give it a go and try to cross. Well, it didn't take very long for that water to grab hold of the underside of his car, his SUV, and it carried him off. He got snagged up on a branch underneath it, looked like a pedestrian bridge, and unfortunately there wasn't anybody that could do it. Anybody that was there, they couldn't do anything to save him. And it didn't take very long. And like I said, the car got swept the rest of the way down the river. Like, he died. I don't know if any of his family members were with him, but it's just kind of like the false bravado attempting to cross the water surface.
Yeah. I mean, and the car as well, it kind of goes back to the idea of the debris being just as hazardous. I remember watching some of the footage for the tsunami that took place. I think it was the one in Japan that I was watching. And cars, because they were all picked up in the streets, people were being pinned against cars. Car moved and they were getting pinned against them. And so, when you think about the massive floating heavy object of a car banging into you, if you're in the water, I mean, you can see why so many people get injured or die in these kind of situations. And just like all flood waters, it kind of, you end up with like a pile of debris into one area, and it just all piles up, and that in itself becomes a bit of a dam, and then that can burst and become more of a deluge. And it's a horrendous situation when you watch some of these videos, or when you see bridges. You ever see like cars floating down a river, and it hits a bridge, and it just gets torn apart and ripped right underneath.
I've seen houses floating down rivers and doing exactly what you're describing.
Yeah. I mean, flash floods, they do happen generally worldwide, and we do get them in the UK. We don't really have, I wouldn't say they're not as dangerous as in the large, Southeast Asia or even the United States. I think it's only like maybe 10 or 20 deaths are attributed towards flooding of some description in the UK. I might be wrong with those numbers, and I know in the US it's about 50 or 60.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you as far as like the exact stats of how many people die. I just know that most of we've already stated, most of the flood victims that have perished, they're found trapped in their cars. And the bad thing about being trapped in the car is like the water doesn't even have to come up all the way over the top of your car. It just needs to rise high enough to put enough positive pressure on the exterior of your car to prevent you from being able to open up your doors to get out.
Yeah. I mean, somebody asking the question about how would a motorbike do in a flood? I ride motorbikes, I ride adventure bikes, and some of what I do is we cross fords. You know, we deliberately cross, you know, rivers and things like that. It's tricky. It's tricky to do it on a bike, to be honest, especially if there's a little bit of rough ground. And I wouldn't say they fare any better than cars.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm just, you know, I don't ride motorbikes. I've never ridden a motor. You know, like I've ridden them. I've ridden one motorcycle once in my life. I really don't. I don't know. It's just not my thing. But I would just advise anybody, you know, unless it's like you said, like it's a ford, a known ford to cross.
Yeah.
I would avoid crossing any moving water. I would avoid crossing any standing water that just suddenly appeared overnight, because you don't know. Because like I was saying, the surface of the water could be placid, could have the appearance of being placid, but you don't know if there's some kind of an undertow, some kind of a undercurrent, because it, like I said, it literally does not take much water to sweep a vehicle away. It just has to make the bottom side of that vehicle just buoyant enough that it lifts the tires off the surface of the road or the ground wherever you're driving on, and then you lose all control.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with when it comes to motor vehicles and water. Typically, you don't want water to go above the exhaust pipe, because you can end up putting, you know,
carbon
you can
monoxide.
draw, not just that, you can draw water in through the exhaust, and that's what will cause the vehicle to stall and cause you know, engine problems and things like that. So vehicles that have got, you know, snorkels and things, they've been retrofitted, you know, so that, you know, the air intakes and things like that are changed and things are sealed, so you can go in some cases as high as the snorkel in the vehicle. A motorcycle hasn't got that, so you can't actually go very deep. But I've been up to my waist on a motorcycle before in water, which isn't sensible. You know, I didn't deliberately do that. It was kind of like what you're talking about there. Is
Right.
I was on an area that was a known ford, so we knew it was a river crossing, but it was only a very narrow pass. And because you can't see under the water, because I slightly veered off the track, it suddenly went into like a dip.
Yeah.
And, you know, I found myself in much more water than I would have preferred to be in. And I'd managed to get out of that, but I did some electrical damage to the bike after that I had to
I'm surprised you didn't hydrolock it.
Well, I was very lucky, actually, because I was going at a decent speed. I kept it in first gear, and I managed to get all the way through. It was relatively short crossing, but I was pretty much up to my waist. The bike got fully submerged. A friend of mine actually fell when he attempted his crossing, so his bike got fully submerged as well. We got it back out, and we managed to dry it off, and with a bit of at the side road jiggery pokery, we managed to get both bikes up and running again. But, you know, there was some permanent electrical damage to my bike that I had to sort. And the thing about modern cars with snorkels as well is, I think people have got to realise that it became a bit of a trend for a while for some people to have these put on their cars, and some of them didn't really function as well as they should. And the thing is,
there's a like you're saying, the retrofitting, especially with the snorkels, like there's a lot more just goes into that other than just slapping a snorkel on there. You got to make sure it's watertight, including all your electrical panels, because like some people, they'll have exposed fuse boxes and electrical panels that aren't properly sealed against possible standing water whenever they go across.
Yeah. And a lot of modern cars are electrically driven with, you know, computers and lots of sensors. So it only takes a few sensors to be knocked out before you've got yourself a vehicle problem. The thing I was going to point out as well is, you know, in the UK, like if you look at an old military Land Rover, for example, like a 110 sort of Defender, and it's got a snorkel on it, if you drive through a riverbed with that, the one thing you'll notice is the inside of the vehicle itself fills full of water. They're not at all watertight. There's no buoyancy.
You really wouldn't want water.
They actually have drain holes so that it deliberately fills full of water.
Little scuppers.
Yeah, and you can watch videos of like guys in the military online up to their neck in water driving, you know, and they're able to do it. Whereas a modern day sort of Land Rover, for example, will be completely sealed. So, like you say, it just becomes a bit of a boat, and it becomes very buoyant, and it doesn't take much, just, you know, a foot or two of water to completely lift that vehicle and it will float. It doesn't matter if it's got a snorkel or not. It's just going to float down the stream.
Yeah, and it's not even the thing is this is not even fully floating. It's just partially. It's just floating enough that your tires are not making positive contact with the surface of the road or the ground, and that's where you lose control. And that's like I said, that's where you're at the mercy of which direction the water's flowing, and then any debris like we were already previously discussing that might be caught up in that torrent of water that you happen to get yourself stuck in.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, the last thing I was going to bring up too, was like, most people, like if for some reason, if you have to cross, and this is mostly for, if you're crossing water on foot, like, especially if we're talking like a smallish creek or whatever, most people, they have it, they have it in their minds that I want to cross the narrowest point. You actually want to cross the widest point, because generally speaking, the water isn't as deep and there isn't nearly as many violent little mini undertows and mini undercurrents in those areas where it's the widest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of, you were saying that there was that American word for describing a sort
And a royal?
And a royal, yeah. I don't think there's a British word. In Scotland, we use a word called spate. So if a river's in spate, it means it's been raining and it's swelled and it's fast flowing and it's in spate. That's what we would call that. And I've heard as well some people describe in the Highlands we get these waterfalls that appear out of nowhere. And some of them are quite torrential. Actually, they can be quite large, and they literally weren't there 5 minutes beforehand.
Yep.
But it's rained, maybe further up the hill. Or somewhere else, and suddenly you've got a huge waterfall. And I've heard deer stalkers refer to that as the hills are in spate. So that's a term that's taken quite seriously, I think, in people who travel around this part of the world. If I was to say, the burn is in spate, a burn is just a Scottish word for stream, or the hills in spate, that usually means keep away from it. It means don't attempt to cross it, or at least be knowledgeable of the fact that what might be easy to cross 10 minutes ago might now be completely impassable. Yeah. And, I think people really do underestimate just how strong water is, because they don't really have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
People go to a swimming pool and they think, well, I'm up to my waist in water, I can feel it, but it's not moving.
Yeah, it's not moving.
You're not feeling it.
And the other thing too is like, all right, I can't, anybody who's better at math than I am, they'll have to translate it to metric for me, but 1 U.S. gallon of water is approximately 8.3 pounds. And, just imagine, like all that's moving, so in order for, in a given area for water to be 6 inches high, 6 to 12 inches high and rushing, I mean, you got to think there's hundreds, thousands of gallons moving across. So, multiply that 8.3 times however many thousands or however many hundreds of thousands of gallons, and that's how much weight your 200-pound body or your 150-pound body is fighting. Because like I said, it's nothing like being in the shallow end of a swimming pool.
Yeah, I mean, isn't
1 gallon? 1 gallon is 4.5 liters, which is 4.5 kilo.
Yeah,
I thought 1 gallon was like 3.78 liters.
A U.S. gallon is different from a European gallon.
Okay. Yeah, well, I said U.S. gallon. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah.
That was the British gallon.
Okay.
Yeah, the proper one then. So, yeah, I mean, I remember hearing something like a cubic meter of water is basically a ton. I'm not sure about that. I need to look that up,
1 cubic meter is 1,000 liter water.
Yeah, so
that's,
I mean,
1 ton.
It's I challenge anybody to try and move anything with a ton, feel the weight of that. And imagine you've got that much water pushing against the door of a car that you're trapped inside. You're never pushing that car over.
And that's what I was saying. Like, it doesn't even have to reach all the way up to the top of the door. It could just get halfway or even a third of the way up the door, and you won't be able to open that door because it's putting enough positive pressure on the outside. Because you get essentially at the point in time you got negative pressure on the inside. You're not fighting that.
Yeah, I mean,
Your best bet is to either window and get out that way.
Or if
That's
you
the
got
only
one of
possibility.
those emergency hammers to break glass with, which
Yeah.
many people don't. I can definitely tell you I don't have one. I probably
Yeah.
should get one, but I
I
don't
think I've
have
actually got one of those lying around.
I have one in my car, and so
Yeah, I've got a few of those lying around, and I've put one in each of the cars. That's a good thing to have in the car anyway, not just from flash flooding,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if you go off a pier or a jetty and you find yourself in water, you won't be able to open that
You don't
door
even
very
have to
easily.
be. You don't even have to be trapped in water, though. You could find yourself trapped
Upside down,
mangled vehicle from a bad accident. You gotta get out. You gotta extract yourself, self rescue. But what was I gonna say? Flash floods are actually worse in areas where they experience droughts than they are in areas where they get regular rainfall, because the soil is a little bit more compacted, and so there isn't as much, I guess, spaces in the, like voids in the ground where the water once was. The soil isn't as porous, it isn't as opened up when it's like extremely sun baked and extremely dry. That's the one bad thing about living out here in West Texas. Like, that's when the flash flooding can be worse, especially like right around springtime, when we've had like a really, really dry winter, or if we have an abnormally dry summer and then we get like either a late summer rain or like an autumn rain. That's when flash flooding is probably going to be bad for us.
yeah.
Somebody asking about how you would modify a car to be able to control in when flooding, or to make it more controllable, I suppose. I mean, the thing is, there's not a lot you can do. There's not a lot you can do. I have seen, if I lived in a place, if I lived in the Australian outback, for example, where every year there was flooding taking place, and I was crossing a lot of streams, I was crossing a lot of fords or something like that, then I would do everything I could to modify my vehicle to suit that situation. I would have a snorkel properly fitted. I would make it as less buoyant as possible. I would want it to not be buoyant at all. So I would have drain holes. I would have a means to be able to easily get the water out. I would, I wouldn't have electrics in places in the car that if they were swamped, suddenly the car becomes inoperable.
Or have it sealed off as much.
Yeah. So I would have a car suited to that kind of situation. I mean, if you take a look at, like I say, old military vehicles, the military do this more than most people, I imagine.
Yeah.
And so they tend to strip everything out of a vehicle, and it's just the bare bones, so that things like water damage doesn't do it as much harm. But you don't need a lot of water in your oil to blow a head gasket, or a lot of water in your fuel to wreck your car.
Yeah, it's a hydrologic.
Yeah, I mean, cars generally are just not designed to be a mound of water. I mean, that's not what they're for.
There are some vehicles out there. There are amphibious cars, but man, they are difficult to get a hold of. They're not really. There are some out there that some companies will do like one-offs and sell them to the public. There was this one car that came out in the 50s. They called it the amphibian, and like it was designed for driving on lakes. But even then, like driving on the placid surface, or driving, like some people, they like to go mud bogging and stuff like that, and they'll drive lifted trucks or SUVs through, these big old mud holes, these water holes and stuff like that. But that's different from driving across the surface of a stream or flowing, like just flash flood. Because like I said, we were saying, the biggest issue is the debris, because it's not just the fact your vehicle just becomes buoyant or doesn't become buoyant. All there needs to be is a submerged tree trunk to just sweep you away, just knock you down, knock you over, roll you over.
Yeah, you also need to know how to, if you're using a vehicle to cross water or fords and things like that, you have to know how to do it properly. It's amazing how many people will have a modified vehicle, like a Land Rover with a snorkel, and then they hit the water as hard as they can, and they wreck it because they've hit it too hard. You have to cross water in a very low gear, a continuous gear, and you have to do it slowly and controlled in order to get your way through it. Funny story, the very first car I ever owned when I was a kid was a Ford Escort Mark III when I was 17 years old, and I ripped that car off by hitting a puddle too fast.
Yep.
Yeah, it was just a puddle. I mean, it must have been like, I don't know, an inch and a half deep or something like that, but it was a large puddle. And because I went through the puddle thing, showing off with my friends in my car, you know, the water went up through, you know, the engine,
intake.
the intake, and
Yeah.
I ripped that car off with a puddle.
I didn't wreck my Chevy Sonic, but I did get a little bit of water in the intake when I splashed through a puddle over here in Texas. Over here in Lubbock, they don't have good storm drains. They don't actually have like a real storm drain infrastructure. It's just they got the roads designed in such a way that everything's sloped and everything flows into like holding ponds on the sides of the roads and in the city parks and stuff like that. Well, I splashed through a puddle of water right after a rainstorm and got a little bit of water in that intake, and that car started running and idling like really rough. But I was lucky I didn't damage the engine, but I ended up throwing some water absorber in the tank, the tank when I was getting fuel for the car, and then it started running right after that. But I was like, yep, I learned my lesson. Do not splash through puddles.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, cars and water just don't mix.
No.
I think having a winch as well. If I was, you know, like I say, if I was in the Australian outback or something, having a really good winch on your car can be a lifesaver. If you find yourself stalled in the middle of the water, you have to get out of there quickly. And, you know, unless there's another vehicle there that can pull you out, the only other way you're going to be able to do it is with a winch. And you know, you can use land anchors and things like that to get yourself out
even
of
that
situations.
is risky, because like I said, if the water is strong enough to either pin your car in place or prevent you from moving, getting out of the car and then going to the front and grabbing your winch cable and your chain or your recovery strap and trying to find a solid anchor point to tie it off. The hardest part is trying to cross what little of that water that you're still stuck in the middle of and not get, you know, wiped off of your feet, you know, washed off your feet and, you know, carried downstream however far.
Yeah. I mean, plus, it's not just that. You're also in the water at that point. Hyperthermia becomes an issue. It doesn't matter how hot it is outside. The water's going to be cold. You don't have to be exposed to that water for long before you will start succumbing to hyperthermia, which will slow down your ability to do things like properly apply a winch or properly operate a vehicle.
Lose your dexterity. You start experiencing a little bit of a brain fog.
I mean, it's going to be the case that, like just about everything in these kind of scenarios that we talk about, the prevention is better than the cure when it comes to a lot of these things. And, you know, my general advice would always be to just don't cross water with a vehicle.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
Just don't do it. If it can be avoided, don't do it.
Yeah. I mean,
there's the detour. The detour will always take a lot less time than you trying to take the shortcut across.
Yeah. I mean, especially in flooding, because it's like you say, it might look relatively calm on the top, but you've got no idea what the flow is like underneath, especially if the water is flowing over something that it doesn't otherwise normally flow over.
And here's the other thing to take into consideration. I got to see this firsthand when I was living out in eastern Nebraska. So I used to live right along the Missouri River in eastern Nebraska. Every year that thing would flow outside its banks, and there'd be road surfaces that were dry and they were well above water. And that water would be like 15, 20 feet outside of its river banks, you know, over the tops of its river banks. But the other thing too, you don't know if the surface of that road, you don't know, as you guys in Britain would call it, the tarmac, you don't know if the road base underneath the tarmac didn't get washed out.
Yeah, good point. And also drain covers can be lifted. Drain covers can be lifted as well. And so suddenly you're wading through what you think is a foot of water on the road, and you fall down a manhole cover because the water's lifted up out of the way, and that can be meters deep.
Oops. Can you answer how would you make a homemade floating aid with thing only in your house?
A homemade floating aid. Well, I think
you can if you have the proper things to do it. If you have barrels, of suitable size, you can make a floating aid for
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
size.
Yeah.
If you have several of those, you still need a frame where you attach those.
to build a raft.
I guess
to
what
build-
I'm trying to
Yeah,
understand is like,
Why
are
would you
they
want to do
saying-
that though?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like unless this is like one of those situations where we're discussing like a flash flood. And again, this isn't unheard of, but you know, like I said, cases where you're in your house and a flash flood happens, and it happens so suddenly before you even have a chance to evacuate, before there's even any emergency broadcast saying evacuate this area, because that does happen, especially out in the southwestern United States. That does happen. That happens if you live on a riverbank. You know, there is more than a 0% chance of that happening.
I tell you what, I would maybe comment on relating to that question, because it is actually a good question when you think about it. Because when you'll often see in the news when you get streets that suddenly flood from a flash flood, and you see the fire brigade sort of with a rubber dinghy pushing up to doors, and they're evacuating old people and things like that from their house. Because they've suddenly, it happens when they're in bed or something,
Yeah.
and suddenly their ground floor is full of water and they can't get out. So it's not a completely unreasonable thing to think, well, how could I make myself a life jacket if something like that was to happen? And the more I think about it, I would recommend not doing that, for the same reason that when you're on an airplane and they say to you, do not inflate your life jacket while you're inside the airplane.
Yeah.
For the same reason.
So, you get trapped inside.
Even if I actually have life jackets randomly in my house, because you can see behind me I've got kayaks. So I'm a kayaker, so I have a life jacket. And if I suddenly woke up and I realized that the whole ground floor of my house was full of water, and even if it was fast moving, I'd be very reluctant to put a life jacket on, whether it was homemade or not, because that can prohibit you from getting out of a window.
It can pin you to the ceiling.
It can pin you to things. Yeah, exactly. You won't be able to duck underwater. You won't be able to do anything.
I'm glad we're bringing this up real quick. I was going to say, for the U.S., for a lot of there are a lot of flooding victims that are found trapped in their houses. Most of them are actually found trapped in the attics of their houses because they're trying to get above the floodwaters, and the floodwaters rise even higher than what they anticipated, and now they're stuck in the attic. They can't get out. I'd be more concerned, making sure I've got some kind of a kit with saws and axes to cut through the roof of my house. So that way I can at least stand up on top of the roof of my house, so I'm not getting, pinned inside my attic with floodwater.
Yeah, I mean, and you see that on TV sometimes, where people are on their roofs and they're surrounded by floodwater, and the helicopter has to sort of lower a basket down to try and rescue them and things like that. That definitely happens. And like you, I've always wondered if people who go into their loft, can they get out of their loft? Because if they haven't got a skylight, how the hell are they getting through the roof? Depending on what your roof is made of.
You got to be able to get through the skylight, because if you got a decent skylight, you're not just punching your way through that. That's poly, like some sort of like poly freaking heavy duty, like poly. I don't know if it's like polyethylene, but some heavy duty friggin' plastic. You're not
Tyvek or something.
Yeah, or polycarbonate or something like that. You're not breaking through that. You're not pushing that out of the way. You're just going to get pinned underneath that and trapped and drowned.
Yeah. I mean, people saying what would happen.
For a bathroom break. I'll be back.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, somebody asking there, what would you do if the water is higher than the roof? I mean, the simple reality is, if you find yourself in water, if you find yourself in flood water, if you find yourself in a flash flood, even if you're not a particularly great swimmer, most people can float. And the general survival advice for being caught up in a flash flood is to lie on your back with your feet facing in the direction of travel. That way you're not going to be banging into sort of rocks and things like that. Your head, hopefully your feet will take the impact. And the idea being that you use your arms as a kind of steering mechanism to get yourself,
upright,
as best you can up, and then hopefully if you can sort of make your way parallel to the water's edge, you can eventually get yourself to the side and pull yourself free, or grab onto something. Like I said, a kayak, I do whitewater kayaking, and I find myself in fast moving water all of the time. I mean, it's part of the hobby, to deliberately find yourself in that situation. So I've found myself going quite fast down fast moving streams before. And I'll tell you just now, you can't swim against it. It doesn't matter how good of a swimmer you are. And it can be quite dangerous because you don't feel all of the, like, you get eddies in the water, you get rocks and things like that. And every now and again, you might bump off one. So you have to try and stay as flat as possible with your feet as high as possible, and kind of just go with the flow a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of like,
and look ahead.
With the rip tides, the rip currents. But that's mostly, this isn't so much flooding. This is mostly out in the ocean. You don't swim against a rip tide or a rip current. You have to swim
parallel to it. Yeah, you go parallel to it. But no, funnily enough, I think some of the advice on that's changed recently. I think they're actually saying you should kind of just allow it to take you out a fair distance, and then once you're out of the rip current, move away from it at that point and move parallel to it. But that's a different subject. I was just randomly, I was reading about that just the other day. But yeah, I mean, if you find yourself in the water, then you have to just be calm, because a lot of people drown because they panic. And they swallow water, and it becomes a sort of that's what causes them the issue. So if possible, go with the flow, lie on your back, feet downstream, and try and self-rescue that way. Be cautious though about grabbing onto things. So the temptation will be to, oh, there's something floating like a car or something. I'll swim over to it and I'll grab onto it. There's nothing wrong with grabbing onto something. If you think it can, keep your head above water. But like I say, be very cautious about what's coming down that water, because if you're up against a tree or a car and another car comes floating down the river,
now you're getting pinned.
Now you're getting pinned. So that's something to be cautious about. But again, this all comes down to trying to foresee this from happening. Try and put yourself in a situation, or rather try and make it so you're not in this situation in the first place. If you live in a place, if your house is in a place where it can genuinely be so flooded that the water can be past the roof, then you should already have lots of flood emergency plans and procedures in place.
Yeah.
Long beforehand. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, really.
Yeah.
That, people who say I had no idea my house could be flooded.
Yeah, well, I find that strange. Topographical. Yeah, there's topographical maps out there, and you'll especially over here in different parts of the U.S., you'll hear people say, "I don't even live near the water," and it's like, yeah, well, probably because you live in a floodplain, you didn't realize it.
Yeah, I tell you what, I mean, if you live within sort of 50 meters of even a small stream, if you live within sort of 100 meters of the ocean, if you live downstream of a dam, if you live in a natural valley or a gullied area, all those places hold water. All those places at some point in history will have water. If you're below sea level, if you're near the water table, all those places can flood.
Yeah.
If you live right on top of a rocky hill and you're hundreds of miles away from the ocean and there's no rivers around about you, the prospect of that flooding is pretty minimal. But, there's always the once in a million sort of chance that happens. But I think if you live near water and places like that, there's lots of things you can do to at least future-proof yourself to the possibility of it happening, even if it doesn't happen very often. I mean, there are people who live in places that, this town hasn't flooded in 100 years. But it did flood 100 years ago, though. That's what you've got to remember.
Yeah.
And if it did it then, has anything been put in place since then that means that it won't happen again? Or was that simply just because of weather?
There's some of these towns and cities along the U.S. coast, especially I don't know if that's in Long Island, New York, but I can definitely tell you for certain in Corpus Christi, Texas, especially along Padre Island, when they build these houses, it's standard building code, they are to be built up on stilts. So you'll have this beachfront house, and the garage down below will be underneath these stilts, these piers and everything.
Yeah.
And then like the main living quarters will be basically like a story or story and a half above the ground surface, because on a regular basis they're getting hit with tropical storms and hurricanes in the spring and summer months.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Bob, by the way, Shadow's just away to the
Yeah,
toilet.
yeah,
So
he's not here yet.
yeah, he's
Hang
not
on.
here. He'll
Hang
come
on.
back.
I'm gonna go on
drop
private chat and I'll let Bob know that he's out real quick.
No, he's got it. He's cool. He knows.
Okay.
I can see him in the regular chat. Have you ever seen one of those canyons flood?
Not in person. Not in person, no. But like I said, I am well aware that stuff happens.
Yeah, I seen one in Spain. I was doing a thing in Spain several years ago, and it was a completely dry. It's the only deserty part of Europe, really, in Spain. It wasn't a deep canyon. It was like a small dry riverbed. But I tell you what, we seen like a trickle of water come down it, and the guy I was with said, "Watch this." And the next 10, 15 minutes, this will be a raging torrent. I guarantee it. And so we hung around and we moved a little bit out of the way and we watched this like water kind of just roll down. And then honestly, 10, 15 minutes later, it was impassable.
It was a river.
It was a river. It was a muddy river torrent. And there was branches, there was boulders, there was all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I've seen that happen in flat. I've never seen that happen in a canyon, but like I said, I've seen that stuff happen in like flat, kind of like plains with some slight hills and slopes.
Yeah,
because like I said, I used to live out in a 100-year floodplain out in Colorado.
Hey, Vanessa.
Yeah, I mean it's important as well for me to point out it wasn't raining where I was at that place in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
It was just it must have been raining somewhere else. It could be raining 50 miles away. Yeah, and
that's the way it works. Yeah. And
do you know
the way it works?
That raging torrent that we witnessed that day, it disappeared about 20 minutes later.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah, it just came and went. It was an incredible thing to see.
Yeah, when I was stationed in Nevada, it's outside of Las Vegas. Las Vegas is inside of a valley, and I saw that myself. Holy crap, a river came from nowhere, and people are stupid, man. I remember when I was stationed there was a guy, he had his wife and his 4 kids in a station wagon, and he tried to drive across it.
Yep.
Can you guess what happened?
Floated off like a boat.
Yep. And they found the mom and the dad and like 3 of the kids in the car. One of the kids gone, just got buried in the silt somewhere out there. Never found that body. Never did. But what an idiot.
Some people never learn. They are so stupid.
They are. All he had to do was wait, a half an hour or so, maybe go get a hamburger or something, go.
And that's why I was telling people, the detour always takes a lot less time than the actual crossing.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much it inconveniences you in the moment. It always takes a lot less time because you don't know if you're going to be a victim. I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something. Damn it. Made me lose my train of thought. I was going to roll, but now I forgot.
Yeah, you were talking about houses being built on stilts. Spring rains and all that.
That's mostly along the coastline for the hurricanes and the tropical storms. Not so much for. I'm sure there's some riverfront properties where people build their houses on stilts. Like I guess if I was crazy enough to own a piece of property alongside a river, especially one that's downstream of a dam, I'd probably be tempted to do the same. We
were actually saying that. So, Bob, you'll be more knowledgeable about this. As we were actually talking about, worldwide flash floods. It's estimated, or the WHO estimates it kills sort of between 5,000 and 10,000 people a year, but mostly in like places like Southeast Asia, Indonesia, places where there's monsoons and stuff like that. See, when you've been in that part of the world, do they do anything with the buildings to mitigate against that, or do they just hope it doesn't happen, or what's the crack there with? Because you'd think that the monsoon season is basically regular, so you would think they would have we know in the monsoon the water does this generally. Let's not build a house here. That would be
Yes, they do. They like over in the Philippines, they have departments in their city government that like soil engineers, etc., and they map out where the floodplains are located. Okay, that's one of the first things they do. Like when we bought our house and our land, my wife used to work for the government, so she knew where to go and looked at the floodplain maps and consulted with the soil engineers and on and on. So they do keep track of this kind of shit. But okay, the Philippines is one set of mountains after another. It's all mountainous, the whole country, or most of it. And um, the bedrock is covered by volcanic ash. All the mountains, it's volcanic ash. And they'll have big slides come down and take out highways, big, massive slides. And
You're
when
saying
they rebuild,
right?
yeah, when they rebuild, they do a great job. They really do. Um, Bulkheads with fitted like concrete
Islands.
blocks.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then between the edge of the mountain and the mountainside, they um, really deep canals to usher away the water as it runs down the hillside. And I've watched the progression in 20 years of going to that country, and they've done a lot of research and development on landslides and water control. Yeah, they do monitor it, then they do make corrections. Yeah.
Yeah, you see it in some alpine countries in Europe where they have, they've got like basically it's a small stream, but then they have like these huge concrete sort of edges to them, and the
Mm-hmm.
idea being that landslides or avalanches, I think, which tend to follow the similar routes, will be channeled in one direction, a controlled direction.
Yeah.
So when you take a look at these sort of storm valleys or storm gullies, as you look at them, they look over the top, because you look at them in the summertime and you think there's just a little trickle of water down there, and they've built this gigantic bloody thing, with concrete either sides and this really heavy duty stone bridge,
Mm-hmm.
concrete bridge or something. You wonder why they've done it. That's why they've done
Yeah.
it. And
Exactly.
there's videos online where you can actually see these things where a landslide has took place, and it's like a torrent of mud and rock and things like that actually
then
go
that's
through
a kitty. A pyroclastic flow is something entirely different.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Unless you're thinking about a lahar, but even then, that's I mean, it's similar concept, but like
yeah. Well, I mean, pyroclastic flows are hot. That's hot
hot
rocks,
gas and ash.
hot gas and ash and things
Mhm.
like you get from volcanoes and stuff. But there's a similar thing that takes place where it's not heated and it isn't a volcano that's done it.
It's
But it
called
looks like a
lahar.
liquid.
It's
It looks
called a lahar. It's
Yeah.
usually when hot volcanic ash makes contact with the snow on the mountain peak or standing water river, and it turns into a muddy torrent of silt or whatever, volcanic silt and ash.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I looked into this stuff because like the one thing that fascinates me, I remember seeing images from an old National Geographic's magazine that had to have been issued back in 1980, but it was over the Mount St. Helens eruption. I got to see
Yes.
Camp Baker for the Weyerhaeuser lumber company, like completely get washed out. I mean, watching these big ass freaking semi truck trailers, these logging trucks, like these are like 100,000 pound semi trucks with logs just getting tossed around like toothpicks from the lahars from that
It's true.
volcanic eruption.
I remember that. I'm in Washington State. I remember watching it on live helicopter footage when it was happening. Holy mama. Yeah. 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 Oh boy. I remember seeing the Toutle River was affected drastically because all the glaciers and the snow melted in an instant.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing an entire house still intact
Yep.
running down the Toutle
Smashed
River.
into the side of the bridge.
Yep.
Yep. I like I said, I wasn't alive during that time, but that like ever since I seen that when I was a kid, seeing those images in that National Geographic's magazine, like that whole eruption has always fascinated me all the way into adulthood. Just the sheer destruction. But again, like I said, it's not necessarily a flash flood because, like I said, we're discussing a lahar, and we're also discussing pyroclastic flows, which are completely different hazards. They're adjacent to flooding, but they're still their own hazard.
Yeah.
Katie has a question, actually.
Mhm.
I have a question. How can I escape a flood when I'm lightheaded a lot?
You need an escape plan. That's what you need.
Yeah.
You need to pre-plan your escape route to begin with, because if you've got a predisposition to a particular kind of illness or disability, the worst time to try and figure out how to get out of a place is
as it's happening.
As it's happening, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So make your plan now is what I would say. If you live in a place where you think there's a possibility of a flash flood, then take note of your escape route. Take note of things like the bridges. Are those bridges likely to still be there in a flash flood, or would they be one of the first things that get washed away because they cross the thing that's likely to be in the path of the flash flood? I mean, one real benefit that you have when it comes to planning a flash flood, as opposed to something like a pyroclastic flow. A pyroclastic flow can happen at any point on the mountain. The mountain can explode at any point, and then the flow can happen from what happens after that. A flash flood tends to always follow the path of least resistance based on where the water is.
Certainly.
So you can basically say, okay, that's where the water is likely to travel because that's the depression in the ground, or that's the place where the small stream is. This is the access. This is the point where the water meets the ocean or whatever. Yeah. So you can base your escape plan around that model. If you live in a town that has a stream or a river, at the bottom of it, and you think flooding is a possibility, make sure that your plan involves going the other way.
And turn the notifications on your phone, because at least in the U.S. they have the National Weather Service. They'll always advise prior to a rain or as the rain is coming down, flash flooding, possible in your area. Pay attention to that stuff, and and you already discussed too, there are, like I said, you can go online and look up topographical maps of your exact area and figure out exactly where you sit as far as, your actual elevation, in conjunction with anything else nearby.
Yeah, you can also dig up a little bit of historical records of previous floods. Floods that have happened in the past.
And worst case scenario, like I said, for those people, like I said, that were caught and they were caught inside their attics and drowned. Like I said, it might be advisable that you stash some saws and some axes so you can cut your way through your roof if the waters are going to get that high and that quick. So you at least got to wait, at least get out of your attic and get up on top of your roof. But like I said, that's the extreme case scenario. You, like I said, you have to have all this stuff in place beforehand. You can't just throw all this shit together on the fly.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, well, I mean, weather forecasting's gotten pretty good over the years. I mean, it's not perfect, but anybody now can look at live radar of weather on their phone. I do it all the time. Not because I live in a flood area. I don't at all live in a flood prone place, but I like to see, what the weather's doing. And you can get quite good at taking a look at the radar of heavy rain, and you can see roughly to the hour when that rain is likely to take place and whether it's upstream of where you're at. This is particularly important when we're talking about things like backcountry canyons, which is where the nub of this conversation is about. You have to pay particular attention to that kind of weather forecasting, and then predict for yourself whether you're likely to be caught in a flood.
And you, like you brought up before, Alan, you're saying like you were down there in Spain, you weren't anywhere near any sort of rain taking place. It's just you just had to be downstream of it. Well, similar case for anybody that lives in the Mississippi River Valley, because you've got the Missouri River, you've got the Ohio River. I don't remember all the different rivers that are feeding into the Mississippi, but like I said, the mighty Mississippi almost every year breaches its levees. Every year or every other year, it'll breach its levees or come close to it. All it takes is a few dams upstream and all those other rivers, those other tributaries I was talking about, being forced to open up the floodgates because they got a lot of excess rain. Now you got the river, the Mississippi River, swelling and being inundated with more water. And that's another example of maybe not a flash flood. I guess that would be like a little bit more of a slower progressing flood, but still, it might appear as though as a flash flood for some people, though, especially people that don't take it seriously.
Yeah. I mean, there's some warning signs you can look out for as well to sort of forecast it. That one that I seen in Spain, we noticed that purely because it was a completely flat, dry area, and then there was a sudden appearance of water. Water just appeared out of nowhere, very slowly. I mean, you could walk faster than the water originally, and then it got faster and faster and faster and higher. But you can also look for things like dark clouds and distant hills, sticks. If it's a flowing river, and then all of a sudden you start seeing debris like sticks or branches and things like that. Just suddenly start appearing. That's because the water has risen substantially higher up and pushed that debris further down. Sudden rise in water levels. Driftwood, things like that. If the water suddenly changes color, so if it's a nice clear stream and then all of a sudden it goes brown or gray or dark, that's because soot has been churned up and that water has traveled from somewhere else. And those are all warning signs. So if you're in a vicinity near water and you see that, then get up. You have to get to high ground. High ground is your friend. That's the key here. You can't outrun it. Don't try and outrun it.
Don't try to outrun it.
No, don't outrun it.
Yeah, and don't try. If avoidable, try not to cross. Try not to cross. I remember I was going to say, because Bob, you brought up Las Vegas. Yeah, the Las Vegas storm, like you ever see their storm sewer infrastructure? Oh my God, they engineered the crap out of that. Like they actually have homeless people living in those, year round, except for when the rain comes.
Yeah, there's a reason for it. Dioris, there's a reason for it because I recall after that family was wiped out by John Dumbass, the city or state went in and dug massive canals. I mean, these canals were as wide as a semi-truck trailer and how deep, and built concrete bridges over the main roads like Las Vegas Boulevard, etc. After that family was killed because, they started acting after there was lives lost. Yeah. But I want to go into this in my area. All right. The trees in the Cascade Mountains are a crop. They're planted by people, and there's millions of acres of trees up there. In the 1970s and into the early 80s, it was time to go in there and log it and harvest the crop because it's all privately owned property, millions of acres. And after that happened, I remember standing on the edge of the Puyallup River when I was a kid. A Douglas fir tree, a mature Douglas fir tree will drink 55 gallons of water every day. Now you wipe all those trees out, and that was back in the days of clear cutting. Okay. That water's got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Nowhere. And I remember on the edge of the Puyallup River watching entire trees, 100-foot tall trees ripping down that river because there was nothing to slow the water down. Absolutely nothing. They went over the banks in a few places. Almost all the rivers in the Cascades went over for about 10 years. After that, the state and the counties, King County, Pierce County, all that, began buying plots of land. And then they dug drainage. They're actually a sedimentary hole in the ground, enormous holes in the ground. They're everywhere now.
Are they like boreholes?
No, they're as bigger than your house. They're like 3 times the size of your house.
Okay.
They dig it out and they put some culverts to drain water into it to slow the water flow down.
Yeah, I was thinking like borehole, not like a drilling rig borehole, but I'm thinking like those tunneling machine type boreholes. That's what I was thinking.
No, this is all above ground or ground level, not underground.
Oh, okay. I guess I was thinking like that because up there in New York, they have this man-made like underground canal. They literally use a tunneling machine and dug it, and that's for how they get their fresh water in certain areas in New York.
Okay.
And I was thinking maybe they did something similar for their infrastructure over here for flood mitigation.
No, these are all catch basins.
Okay.
Example is when a supermarket locally went in, it was installed. It's now a requirement that the parking lot area drains into a catch basin before it goes out into the river. It slows that water flow down, but it took the 1970s and 80s disasters for the state to finally act on it.
Yeah.
But now, ever since they started digging those drainage basins all over the place, I haven't seen that river or a few others come over its banks ever again. So, unfortunately, there's got to be property loss or lives lost before government will act on it.
And like I was saying over here, they got a series of like retention ponds for their flood control over here in Lubbock.
Hey,
Yep.
Good to see you.
It's a kind
They
of
slow the water down.
Those retention ponds. I notice them in new build housing estates over here in the UK when they build a whole. They build like a whole development full of houses. They have like a big dugout area with a drain, and it usually hasn't got any water in it. But I think the thinking is that if it rains, that's kind of where
because
the sun goes to.
It'll channel downhill on the paved surfaces, your tarmac, your parking lots, or as you guys call it, the car parks, into that drainage basin.
I've seen
exactly
as well
what it is.
I've seen I was in LA a few years ago, and they have these gigantic sort of, they almost look like a roadway.
And like there's tons of movies that were filmed on those
Terminator.
Terminator, Grease, like 1978 John Travolta, Grease, Freaky Friday, the original Freaky Friday from the 60s was filmed there. There was another movie, I think it was called Core. It was a box office flop. That was also filmed there as well.
Do those actually fill full of water? Is that a regular thing? I've never seen.
They fill with water. That's what they're there for. Flood control.
And they're enormous. They're gigantic.
They get like this. In spite of popular belief, Southern California does get a great deal of rain, but it's seasonal rain, and like I said, that's to mitigate all these flash flood waters that we were just talking about. That stuff's been in. I don't know how long that's been in place. It's had to have been in place since, I would say, the 50s, since post World War II.
Purple Ariel says it's like watching the news when there's a storm and the folk take their kids to the beach and they are filming the storm. I feel like shouting at the TV, "Move, you fools!"
Yeah. You're just asking for trouble.
Darwinism. Darwinism. You got the same people out in the Midwest and in the tornado alleys. They're out there. There's a tornado right there on the horizon, and they're out there with their smartphone filming. It's like, and then the tornado barrels down over top of them. Just by sheer luck, they didn't die, but the tornado took out their house or sections of their house around them as they're standing out there on their front porch filming like a dumbass.
You'll always see here as well with the waves crashing over the walkway, and you'll always see some idiot walking their dog.
I watched a video. I watched on YouTube a couple of years ago, and I watched the same footage on the news many years ago. There was a guy on a pier, and it was huge waves, and he stood there at the edge of the pier with his phone and filming it, and the wave just came in and wiped
Gone.
away.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, stupid.
You know what? An old guy I worked with for years, he was a Navy vet, real morbid son of a bitch. But you know what he used to call that? It's what? Bob. It's just part of It's just part of bleaching the gene pool. Well, it's just bleaching the gene pool.
Like it's one thing if you don't know, because no one taught you, or you never got to learn. But it's another thing is just being ignorant of the fact, and deliberately putting yourself in harm's way.
Do you know what I think a lot of that is though? When you see people do things like they
False
stand
bravado.
on piers. Well, not just that, but you see people do things like stand on piers when there's huge waves, or you see people stand next to river or on bridges as huge torrents of water is rushing underneath it. It's because people have separated themselves so much from nature.
Yeah.
They just they have this false belief that, well, somebody's thought about it, and I'm sure whoever built this bridge
It's
or
never
pier,
happened to me.
it'll never happen to me, and they wouldn't build a pier if they didn't think it could withstand something like this. It's that kind of removal, that ignorance of removing yourself entirely from nature, that you lose the common sense that any other animal in the world would have. That there's a stormy sea, I know, I'll stand back from it. Or there's a torrent of water raging down this river, I know, I'll stay clear. There's this stupidity of, well, it's a bridge and I'm sure it'll hold up fine because somebody will have figured this out, type thing. That's separation from nature.
One early tell of someplace to leave is when you see the wildlife leave. If you see the flocks of the birds are flying away from something, and wildlife or pets getting away from something,
deer, things like that,
follow them. They know something that I don't know. I'm leaving.
The herd.
Follow the herd. Because I know a tsunami is not really a flash flood, but I saw footage in Thailand of the elephants, the elephants and the dogs and the birds getting out of that area, and the people were like,
I think they mentioned that during the 2004 Indonesia earthquake, that tsunami happened late December, it was December 27th, 2004,
Boxing Day. It's Boxing Day.
Yeah,
I was over in the Philippines when that happened, but
I was in Nebraska when that happened.
When the animals are leaving, follow them. They know something you don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like I say, where people sort of separate themselves from nature. Sometimes there is a phenomenon that's just so rare that people wouldn't know about it. And it's funny you guys mentioned the tsunami, because like I've said before, I was in Phuket just a few weeks rather, before that tsunami hit and devastated Phuket. And I was there with a friend, and we actually wanted to stay there over Christmas and New Year. And the tsunami took place, I think, in Boxing Day. So we would have been, probably dead because it happened early in the morning.
Yeah.
But the thing that gets me about that, now, even way back then, I was still a survival type person. I still pay attention to this kind of stuff. And I always think, well, what would you have done if you were there and you were awake? I probably wouldn't have been because it was too early in the morning. But if I was awake, and the thing that always gets me is, how those images of the ocean going out, and it was all bare.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, people were going out there just to collect coral, and shells, and whatever.
Yeah. But here's the thing: we mock that now with hindsight.
Yeah.
How many people actually knew that was?
There was. It's ironic that you mentioned that, because there was one British guy that was on holiday with his family, and he was screaming and yelling to people, "Get to high ground now!" And this was before the waters were coming back violently, and he saved a whole bunch of. I don't know how many people's lives he saved, but he saved the lives of his own family and himself. But he even put himself in a little bit of harm's way, trying to warn the locals and warn everybody around. Get to high ground immediately.
Well, do you know, the reason I bring it up is because it's kind of like a little bit of, I'm almost ashamed as a survival type person to admit this, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a phenomenon. And I actually think
I wouldn't have known that either, but I was also
if I was there and if I seen the beach suddenly empty of water, I think, because I'm a kind of curious person, and I was about 20. I was 20 years old when that happened. I think I probably would have been one of those people who wandered out, saying, "Check this out."
I would have been too, because, like I said, I was 13 when all that stuff was going on.
I saw a foreign lady. She was somewhere in Thailand. I was in Makati City in the Philippines when that happened. Nothing happened to us, but this lady was getting a massage on the beach, and the ocean was sweeping outwards, and the Thai people recognized something's wrong. And I guess the Thai lady was giving her a massage. Says, "Get your
Yeah.
children, go now!"
Yes,
And
practically,
all the Thai people took off, and they're running like hell. And the tourists were standing there. "Oh, look, Marvin. And then what's happening?" And the Thais who live there, like, "This ain't normal. Get the hell out of here!"
Yeah, I
And
mean,
that
there were
that
countless
lady,
cases where
yeah,
people they only survived by mere chance because they happened to get pinned against something
oh yeah,
by the
Oh.
waters rushing back in.
Oh, dude, what I witnessed on the nightly news when I was in the Philippines when that happened. Overseas, they don't filter their news. They don't filter it. It's as
Yeah.
it happens, as raw
Uncensored,
footage.
unblurred.
Basically
Oh,
raw
dude.
data, all of it.
I recall one scene that they showed on the Filipino news. It was somebody was up on a balcony filming a small street below them. It was full of moms and their preschool kids getting vegetables and stuff. A street scene over in Asia.
Yeah.
And holy mother of God, man, when the water came in, it wiped all those people out. I mean, some of them were able to get inside of a structure and run. Some of them didn't have a time to do that. And it was a river suddenly, and it was full of sheet metal roofing and all that, and all these moms and preschool kids just got freaking wiped out, man. They don't show that on our news.
Yeah.
No.
And I saw scenes after scene and another memorable one was when it was a tiny fishing village on the coast. It was gone.
Oh, yeah.
And the few survivors were able to get a truck and a chainsaw fixed. And these are okay. And they had a big truck full of bodies. That's their families. That's their neighbors. And they had to get a chainsaw and cut up firewood, and they were having to burn their family members. And they didn't show that on our news. Now, okay, I witnessed all this stuff every day when I was overseas. And I came back home, and the Americans were like, "Oh, yeah, I heard something." I was like, "Dude, our news only showed an old couple hanging onto a fucking pole and
Yeah.
getting swept away. That's all they showed us.
Yeah.
That's it."
That is how we do it in the West.
Yeah,
We filter everything.
Well, like I said, they
don't
didn't
show
show
everything.
everything.
They didn't show hardly anything about, because
Mhm.
Alan brought up the Fukushima, the earthquakes that took place in Japan in 2011. Like I said, I never paid. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that either. But like, I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't until maybe a few months ago when I started getting stuff in my YouTube feed about random disasters, and one of the disasters was specifically that earthquake over there in Japan, and then they're talking about the majority of the deaths was all that water rushing in, because like a lot of those people, they didn't have time. They legit didn't have time. And back to what you're saying, people dying of hypothermia from the floodwaters. Well, that's exactly what happened to these people that that got washed away with the tsunami. They might have survived the initial tsunami and the rushing water and the debris, but a lot of them died from hypothermia. There were people that were convinced that they were a high enough point on the land that they weren't going to get touched by the tsunami. No, they were wrong.
There was also a lot of people.
Skyscrapers got wiped out.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people who died because they knew that they had to get to higher ground, but they thought that meant they simply just had to go upstairs in the building they were in.
Yeah,
and a lot of those buildings didn't survive. A lot of those buildings fell down, and
there were buildings that still managed to stay standing. But what happened was like the waters just punched right through it, and it just left it as a standing, endoskeleton. The frames of the buildings were still there, the steel frames, but all the masonry work, all the interior walls, the exterior walls, all the glass completely wiped out, gone.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, if you can see footage on YouTube of boats slamming into buildings and the weight of the boats. And these are like huge fishing boats and
Yeah.
things getting pushed up against these relatively fragile Japanese buildings and just
Yeah.
tearing them apart. And like you guys have mentioned, Western media doesn't tend to really show you the proper devastation. But I do remember an image where everybody was filming it on these rooftops, and they panned the camera over this area, and you could see lots of other rooftops and people on top of all the roofs. And then the same camera panned over the same area about 20 minutes later, and most of those buildings were now gone.
Yeah.
So you've got to assume that the people in those buildings and on those roofs are also now gone.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no way of working out whether the building you're on is structurally sound enough to be able to not only handle that water, but could it also handle a bloody fishing boat slamming into the side of it? That's the thing that people just don't appreciate.
Well, like
you could never forecast for that.
Saying historical data of previous floods. So they had historical data of previous tsunamis in that specific area, and that they built a lot of their buildings above that highest recorded point. But in lots of cases, they, you know, the waters from that tsunami went above those points, and that's what I was saying. Some of those buildings, they were built above that point, where they thought, they were convinced, they were up on the upper floors, they were up on the rooftop,
they'd be okay. Yeah,
they thought they were going to be okay. In fact, there was an emergency center specifically for tsunamis that was built on one of these high-rise skyscrapers. That tsunami center got wiped out.
Well, it reminds me as well about Hurricane Katrina, where, you know, people wouldn't have guessed that the levees would have broke the way that they did.
Yeah,
effectively flooding the city.
Yeah, New Orleans.
Yeah, in New Orleans. And when those levees broke, I mean, you had instantaneous flash flooding taking place, and you know, people drowned in places they would never have believed that could have happened. And it's like I said before, I mean, we're talking about flash floods here, and people don't pay them as much attention. But even in the continental United States, more people die from flash floods than they do of hurricanes or tornadoes.
Yeah,
every year. You know, that's 50, 60 people a year just dying from floods that otherwise don't need to die. It's just because they haven't given it enough forethought. They just simply haven't thought about it. You know, we're not talking about the occasional unfortunate person who, you know, a flood literally comes out of nowhere that they couldn't possibly, you know, they were new to the town or something and they fell in the river. I mean, we're talking about people who just think, oh, I can get by that in my car, no problem. I've got the latest SUV. It can take anything, you know, and that's not the case. You just have to be a lot more. You have to take it more seriously. You have to be more respectful of nature.
Yeah, you're lucky Bob's not here.
Agree.
Yeah, water tables can rise. Yeah, for sure.
No, I was just talking about the previous comment because Bob would have fired him for that other one.
What? Oh God, Canada's here. Oh my God. Hey, I recall when I was with a Bigfoot group of people.
Oh yeah.
There was a flash flood on the Green River, I think it was. And one of the ladies that I used to subscribe to, she stood next to the bank of the Green River. And there were trees and all the debris was running down the river. And you know what, man? There was a full tree that was under the water, but it was going like how many kilometers per hour, just rushing right along. And this whole alder tree came up out of the water, straight up in the air, and it damn near took her out. Just that quick. Whoom! You got a whole tree coming straight at her. And she dodged and missed it. So if get away from it, just get away from the river's edge. But she wanted to get it on YouTube, you know, and well, there's a lesson learned. Get the hell away from it, because a whole tree came down right next to her. It would have took her out. It would have wiped her out.
I got a sinking feeling.
Okay, I'm going to document this, enter this into the side chat. Strike one. There we go. We're gonna document this.
Yeah, you like to see our strikes.
Strike one.
Yeah.
Very, and oh my God, that freaking guy.
Floodwater moving is very energetic. Yeah, it
Yes, it is.
is.
It is.
It has a
Especially,
lot of power.
See, I thought he was
es-
going to insert a pun about the stream.
oh God, don't encourage him. God damn it. My wife's first career was a civil engineer, and it was something that I had never thought of. Was she was talking about, the flood water is full of soil, and she said, and she knows all that math Asian shit in her
Yeah.
head, and that increases the weight of the water by so many volume per cubic liters of water, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, if it's filthy, dirty water, increases the weight of the water substantially. But that was something I never thought of. But
Yeah.
you know.
And then the other thing to take in consideration, okay, outside of like the usual flash floods and like canyons and arroyos and all that we were discussing, but like
Yeah.
the other hazard to take into consideration after the fact, especially for like some massive flooding in a given area, is there's going to be a lot of pollutants, and the water is going to be very dangerous, very toxic, actually be in contact with because of chemicals, pesticides, and most importantly, sewage, raw untreated sewage.
Yeah.
And often in places where like the rivers are breaching their banks, like a lot of the water treatment plants in the area, they'll just straight discharge, just straight sewage into the river because they can't, they don't have the time, they don't have the facilities to treat it because their facilities are actively being inundated with flood water.
Do you know, in the UK, our water companies actively discharge sewage when it rains. Because there's a loophole in our law that says that when the water table gets sort of overwhelmed, the sewage companies are allowed to discharge untreated water into the waterways. Because our water companies are privately owned, they use this as an excuse to discharge unclean water basically into our waterways whenever there's a little bit of rain. They do it all the time. They've been caught doing it so much, the government fines them. But the fines are cheaper than what it costs to treat the water, so they do it anyway.
Yeah.
So it's something to pay attention to if you are, into water. Like I'm interested in water sports. This is why I know about this. So if it's been a rainy week, for example, I will know for a fact that some of the waterways that I use will have an excess of sewage, not because the water was overwhelmed, but because the treatment companies have deliberately done that. They've deliberately polluted the waterways.
Yeah.
So that's just something to watch as well, especially in the UK. I don't know about other countries, but I know that it happens here all the time.
Yeah, because like I said, what I was discussing is mostly in the US, and that's mostly in like areas like the Mississippi River Valley, and like I said, up there in Nebraska, eastern Nebraska along the Missouri. Yeah, like I said, they'd straight up just discharge the sewage straight in the water because there's not a whole lot that can be done at that point in time. The rest of their treatment facilities downstream, and it's actively getting flooded.
Yeah.
That's the something to consider about that, because if you have an open laceration on your legs and you got to wade across the shallow plot of water, you later on you could be in real trouble. That open sewage, the infection that it can cause, you're in trouble, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Plus, I can also, if you've got a small holding or something, or if you've got a garden where you're growing vegetables or you're growing food, or you have water butts or something like that, you have to now bear in mind that all of this can now be contaminated. All of this could, there could be runoff going on there as well. So yeah, I mean that's definitely.
So the hazard doesn't go away when the flood waters recede, because all that mud, all that standing water that's still left, that's all contaminated water.
Yeah, I mean, plus you'll also get when you have if you live in
exactly.
I mean, if you live in a small town or something and it's experiencing a particularly bad flood, you're going to have power lines falling, trees falling,
energized.
So you've got electrical hazards, you've got all sorts of issues going on, and eventually the power will go out because the power companies will probably switch it off deliberately for this very reason. But then when the nighttime comes, or if this happens in winter time, you could be stumbling around in the pitch black trying to work out what's going on, up to your waist in water, try to evacuate. So again, this all comes down to something we always talk about on this podcast is situational awareness. But sometimes situational awareness is about trying to forecast as far ahead of time as possible. And when it comes to flooding, a lot of the time, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, even a flash flood can be predicted, or at least you can forecast it as a possibility. Because
again,
you know
like I said, have your notifications turned on your phone. Like if you live in the U.S., that we've got the National Weather Service, they will give you notifications if your area is, at risk of experiencing a flash flood as it's starting to rain or severe thunderstorms are moving in the area. I was going to say the other type of flooding I've seen, it's not so much flash flooding. It's more or less like this is like late winter going into early spring. I've seen this a lot out there on the Platte River in Nebraska, where they would experience ice jams on the river where the ice would just dam up along the railroad bridges and the highway bridges, and you'd have water starting to build up and starting to break outside the river banks. That's another consideration, but like I said, that's a very locale specific type of hazard. But I'm sure there other regions in the world that experience something similar.
Well, talking about ice, actually, and it's because CR's in the house, I mean, this might be more relevant to him.
Yeah.
You do get glaciers every now and again that will either a large block of ice will collapse or they will suddenly have a bit of melt go on. And this can cause some horrendous flash floods. I think it was only relatively recently, I believe, that the largest recorded wave, I think it was a wave, or maybe the largest, I don't know what you would call it, but basically a glacier collapsed, I think, or it was a glacier had moved the side of a hillside, which caused a landslide, which fell into a type of.
That was in Alaska.
It might have been Alaska, but it fell into like a fjord, and it caused a gigantic tidal wave.
Oh wow!
This thing was enormous.
I think that's technically. I think that would still be classified as a tsunami because it's. I don't know. Maybe
possibly, possibly. I mean, that's a very obviously that's not a very normal occurrence, but I would say, I mean, if you live somewhere like Norway, and you live at the bottom of a fjord, and then further up from there, there's the possibility of landslides, either from the land or from glaciers or something. You're going to have that as a possibility, or even if you live downstream of a dam, just a normal dam, they can break sometimes.
Yeah,
they do. Yeah,
they don't have to break because, like I said, I lived out in eastern Nebraska. Like I said, we had a dam to the south end of the Missouri. We had a dam on the north end of the Missouri. They would release those floodgates quite often, especially upstream, especially if they were getting too much water, just to avoid the hazard of the dam getting washed out. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bob.
And as preppers, that's a lot of us on the panel and the side chat. I've got water purification tablets. I've got more than one way to heat water. I've got a distillery. Get some of that stuff and keep it on hand, keep it safe, and just keep it safe. I've also got water in storage just for any situation where the water might be compromised. It's coming out of my tap. I've got a backup to it.
Yeah.
And like I said, more than one way to be able to heat water, because you're pretty safe as long as you can bring water up to a hard boil. You're going to be okay, but that's really important. I do believe that a lot of people who are beginning and getting prepared overlook water, because all you got to do is flip the tap up and you got water flowing. Well,
yeah. I mean, I think it's all of us that aren't even. It doesn't even have to be prepper. I mean, that's all of us. It's like
all of us.
The water turns on. It turned on yesterday. It's turning on right now. Who's to say it's still that it shouldn't still be able to turn on tomorrow or whenever.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? The hardest thing, as far as like I guess in contaminated water situations, since you're bringing this up, the hardest thing to treat for is chemical contamination. You can't
Oh,
without distillation. That's really the only way you're going to get chemical contaminants out. As far as like biological and viral, yeah, then chemicals and filtration is going to be your best friend.
Yeah, I mean, there are some systems, there are some purifier filters, things like the Grail, for example, which is not just a filter, it's also a purifier. That actually works better than boiling, because boiling is the go-to method for most things, but all you're really doing is pasteurizing water, and kind of like Dior says there, that won't remove things like heavy metals or some runoffs from farmland and things like that.
Yeah.
So you really need to purify that chemically, or with something like the Grail. A Grail will actually is a very, very, very fine filter, and can actually remove things like pesticides and heavy metals and almost every other contaminant you can think of, bar radioactive type contaminants and things like that.
Pre-filter, exactly, CR.
Yeah. It's not cheap though, and it's not something you can do for a long period of time, because although you might get
energy intensive.
It's not just that. I mean, you're going to pay sort of 60, 70 bucks for something that purifies. I don't know. I can't remember how many liters of water, but let's say it's 10,000. That sounds like a lot, but if you've got a family of 4, that's not a lot of water, over a long period of time. So you will need something bigger, something more substantial in order to purify your water.
Yeah, a lot of people, they like over here in the U.S. I can't say on for the rest of the world, but like a lot of people, at least the prepper community or the ones that are a little bit more preparedness minded, they like using the Berkeys. I personally,
they also good filters, but expensive.
Yeah, well, I like the Alexa Pure Pros because they're actually better than the Berkeys. They filter. They do a much better job at filtering water than Berkeys do.
Trying to find it on Amazon right now. The one that I bought is a distiller. I put a video or 2 on my channel about distilling water, and I recommend that even as a backup or primary, one of these distillers will take away it takes out all chemicals, everything. And it brings.
And that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying. Like when it comes to chemical contamination, really the only feasible way is distillation. But you're also stripping your water of all your minerals as well.
Yeah,
and that's something to take in mind. The other thing too, with the other downside with distillation is it's very energy intensive. Like it requires a lot of whether you're using a propane stove or butane stove, or whether you're using an open fire with firewood, it requires a lot of energy just to get that water to a rolling boil, so you can start. So, like I said, there's trade-offs, there's benefits and trade-offs to everything, but nothing, nothing's foolproof, nothing is perfect.
Right.
No. Your best bet is to have stored water. Do everything, but have stored water on hand so you're not having to do that straight away.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, if you are looking to, if you can't store a lot of water, and what you're looking to do is try and purify water, and you're looking for something like the Grail, that's the one I recommend. There are a couple other ones. What you want to do is make sure that the product you're buying can remove something called VOCs. VOCs are volatile organic compounds. Yeah. Those are the things that you find in chemical runoffs from agriculture. And that's the number one thing that most people fall ill from, especially in urban areas or even in the countryside, because the vast majority of the chemicals that meet contact with water are from agriculture. They're not natural. It's not, unless you live like in, the Congo or something like that, you're not actually going to be too worried about natural phenomenons, cryptosporidians and things like that. It's mostly agricultural type stuff. So look for something that removes VOCs. But if I had the ability to do it, I would take my water, I would filter it, I would purify it, then I would boil it. I would do both. I would do everything I possibly could. But like Dior says as well, is if you can think ahead of time and store that water. I've seen your collection of water, and that's the absolute fail-safe way of doing something. Even in a flood, even if your basement floods, that stuff's going to be protected because it's in those solid blue containers. I'm assuming they can take a bit of a beating.
Yeah. Like the igloos can, the Reliance can to a point. Oh, there we go. Got Bob back.
Yeah.
Bob
Yeah.
was going to say something, but he ended up getting kicked off briefly.
I did it myself. I'm
Oh.
trying to pull up an image of the Butler Creek. I'll type it in the side chat.
Hey, can you type it in the main chat there, Alan? What you were saying about the about what was that? What was that one filter you were talking about?
Oh,
Like,
the Grail.
type
The
the
Grail.
name.
It removes
Spell it out.
VOCs.
Spell it out for everybody in the chat because I'm going to look it up
Oh,
after.
okay.
Like in the main chat, not the private.
Yeah. What I just entered in the side chat, Butler
we go.
Creek Distiller. I've got one. I got a couple of videos on my channel about using it. It is energy intensive and it takes time, but that's why I've got bulk water.
It's better than nothing.
Right. I've got bulk water and storage.
Yep.
To supplement, to provide for the family until I have to get to that point.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about having stored water. It doesn't have you in this critical emergency where,
right,
oh God, I need to get water now. You know, you've already got that covered. Like I said, it gives you enough time to get everything else set up in time. Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch your video about the Butler Creek one because, like I said, I remember watching the first video with that copper one that you had to do some modifications to, and it just wasn't working.
Yeah, that first one, that copper one, that's a flower pot on my back deck now. It was
I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, get the Butler Creek is all stainless steel, no flashing gimmicky bullshit. You know, get the Butler Creek one because it's just straight up. You know.
Yeah.
There we go. Look at that.
Yeah, he had to join me.
There he is.
I was just having a quick look at because I'm terrible at spelling just how to correctly spell that. So I've put it's called the Grail GeoPress is the one that I've got. It filters 250 liters from one cartridge. You can get them on Amazon, things like that. But it filters viruses. It purifies against viruses, VOCs, and PFAS and things like that. For anybody interested, I actually did a video reviewing it on my own channel. But like I said, that to me, it's a very good personal water purifier, not just a filter. People mistake filters for purifiers. They're two different things.
Yeah.
A filter just removes particulates. Large particulates. It doesn't purify the water. You need chemicals for that, or something.
Depending on the medium inside that filter, viruses and some of the bacteria, like we were talking about, the cryptosporidiums would be the quote unquote particulate.
Yeah, absolutely. So you need something that can remove a virus because a virus is a very, very small particle to remove. So the Grail will remove things like E. coli, Salmonella, Protozoa, microplastics, chemicals, heavy metals, that kind of stuff. The only thing it won't remove, like I say, is it's not going to remove salt or anything. You would need like a reverse osmosis system for that.
And that's like I said, salt would be basically same classification as the chemicals. That's where you'd need distillation because that's
absolutely.
It's absolutely the only option unless there's something out there that I'm not aware of that's on the market.
I'm not aware of anything like that. I mean, but that's a thing as well to talk about is, just briefly when you're talking about flooding. If you live, if you're getting your fresh water predominantly from a reservoir or something like that, but it's also relatively close to like a brackish water or salt water, flooding can then cause
or like
salt contamination.
What we were saying with the runoff from farm fields, the fertilizer runoff, you get the algae blooms that might happen in your reservoirs too.
Blue-green algae, things like that. Funnily enough, a lot of people think when they talk about they hear things like blue-green algae blooms and things like that, and they think it's okay, I'll boil my water. Boiling water with blue-green algae in it actually makes it worse. Because what happens is the algae dies when it gets boiled, but it gives off a toxin when it dies, and that's the thing that causes you more harm.
I think that's H2S gas. I think like hydrogen. I think that's what the blue green algae, because there's some lakes and reservoirs out here in West Texas out there near like Mitchell County that got contaminated. Like these are recreational lakes that people would come down to fish and jet ski and everything, and they ended up getting contaminated with the runoff. And like I said, it got the blue green algae. Yeah, you can't swim in them anymore. You can't boat in them. You can't fish in them because it's not safe. Because, like I said, the algae actually traps these dangerous gases.
Yeah, I mean, and you tend to get it in sort of stagnant or still water, but not always. I mean, you do get it in, relatively large bodies of water. We had a case of it happen not far from where I live in a very large loch, or lake, as you would maybe call it. And you wouldn't think that something like that could happen there, but it did. And the only reason people knew about it is because a couple of dogs died.
Yeah.
Because they drunk the water, and then when they did test and they realized, oh wait a minute, we've got a bloom here. And that's what alerted people.
I heard of a story where people are walking their dogs are out on trails over here in Texas. They're walking these trails, and there were ponds and lakes and stuff like that, and the dogs splashed through the shallows and stirred up some of this algae and released those gases I was talking about. And it ended up not just killing the dogs, it ended up killing their owners nearby that were on the trail.
Wow. That's a hell of a lot of gas released. Whoa.
Oh yeah.
I think I'm pretty certain it's H2S. I think H2S. I think it's hydrogen sulfide.
I'm not sure. I would have to look it up.
Because, like I said, H2S, it does not take much gas to incapacitate, let alone kill you. Like H2S is a big hazard for the oil field industry because everybody's got to be fitted with a gas mask, and not a respirator, but a gas mask.
No matter what happens, blame Canada. No, but really, that's a good segue into water treatment, because if there is a flash flood, you can almost count on it. Your drinking water is going to be tainted. So, and for God's sakes, if you get a notification from the state or the county or whoever that, don't drink the water, don't drink the water.
You put up a big sign with "Don't drink the water," and people drink the water anyway.
Yeah, kind of like that guy on the end of the pier, gotten washed away. Oh, look, Marvin, look at the pretty waves. That same mentality.
I think it's probably a good idea to try and find out where your tap water comes from. I mean, what's its source? I bet a lot of people don't know that. I mean, is it groundwater? Does it come from a well? Does it come from a reservoir? Does it come from some pumping station somewhere?
I think for over here, our water comes from both the Ogallala Aquifer and the Brazos River, because we got a section of the Brazos River that kind of snakes through the west end of town, and they built a couple reservoirs to trap some of that water, and that's where we get some of our drinking water. That's my understanding. I might have to look a little bit more deeper into it. Like I said, I don't think too much about it, just because I keep a lot of stored water on hand, just so I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. When I go abroad, I take my Grail water filter with me because I don't trust, unless I drink bottled water, I don't trust tap water anywhere. I was in Germany a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't even trust the water there, and I'm sure it's fine. But I took my Grail with me anyway. I've probably got
an ounce of precaution is worth a pound of cure.
I've got Alan. I've got water purification tablets, and I usually wear one of these button-down shirts when I'm over in the Philippines, because it's
flip
so
that
freaking
the
hot.
other way around. Flip that the other way around, so that way I'm going to type that in the comments that way.
But
RAYL.
Yeah, I carry some water purification tablets in my shirt pocket when I go over to the Philippines. There's plenty of bottled water over there, etc. But who knows?
Never know when you run into a situation where you can't get bottled water.
Exactly, a landslide that shuts off the highways or whatever, and I can't get to the market to get more water. That's why I put some of these in one of these shirt pockets right here.
And those bottles don't take that much space, because you got the you got the one where it's just a single bottle with just one type of tablet, and then you got the ones where it's like potassium iodine.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I know guys on the panel here who've heard me on panel before. I got water sick over there once.
Yeah, yeah. You tell me about
Once.
the coffee. Putting your
Oh,
coffee
yeah.
maker, filling it up with the tap water over there.
Don't make that mistake, guys. Yeah, a coffee maker does not get your water hot enough to sanitize it or anything. Oh, baby, I was sick.
But
God Almighty.
I know we're getting a little bit off topic here, but I thought I would bring this up. This is somewhat adjacent since we were kind of going off.
It is
with water purification. But correct me if I'm wrong, but there are companies out there, commercial companies out there, where you can get a filtration system installed on your water main before it goes straight into your house and the tap water goes into your house.
You can,
yes. Yeah, I mentioned that to my missus, and my brother-in-law handles everything that goes on with our house over there. And I said, plan on getting a boost pump installed for water pressure and filtration system be built right into our water main, because the neighbors at our house over there, it's a brand new house, and they already had that installed in their in-feed. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I said, budget that in, Mrs. Eventually we're going to have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see quickly just on home water filters, by the way, purely, I know it's slightly off topic as well, but something a lot of people don't realize is, see the chemicals that water companies use to treat the water. They use a type of chlorine, or they'll use what's that stuff that they sometimes put in toothpaste?
Oh,
fluoride and things like that.
I don't think fluoride does any, as far as like treating the water. I don't think it really does a whole lot. I think it's just so that we get quote unquote stronger teeth and bones.
Do you know, I just don't believe that, because it doesn't make any
either.
sense because of the tiny amount that they put in it. I know the reason for using it originally was something to do with it's an effective water sanitizer or treatment for drinking water, but it also has that side benefit. But that said, you can actually get water filters or purifiers in your house that remove those chemicals entirely. And you can get them fitted to things like your shower. And people think, why would you want one fitted to your shower? You're not drinking your shower water. Well, because you're inhaling it. Because see that
your pores are opening up.
Too. And you're breathing it into your lungs. So if you can afford it, there are companies out there. I don't know of any in the UK. I only actually know about this one because I listened to an American podcast, and it's one of their promotions.
Alexa Pure Pro filters out.
Probably something like them.
Alexa Pure Pro on their gravity fed water filters, they filter out fluoride. Because they use a ceramic medium for their filtration.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what Berkey uses too, but that's what Alexa Pure Pro uses for their filters.
Berkey, I think they have ceramic filters.
I mean, a lot of places will use carbon and things like that. As the primary use of filtering. One of the best kind of carbon filters you can get, or charcoal type based filters, is from coconut
activated charcoal.
Activated charcoal from coconut husks is particularly effective for a lot of water purification.
I'm not sure what would be made out of particularly. I just know like charcoal in general, it takes the funky taste out of the water. That's pretty much what it does. But like activated charcoal, like I said, it just absorbs everything.
Yeah, I've got some water purification.
I forget what they use. What was it? What do they use? Is it was it calcium? What the hell is it? I forget what the hell they mix with charcoal to make activated charcoal, because you can make your own activated charcoal. I just forget. Was it calcium carbonate? I forget what the hell they mixed with it.
I can't remember.
I'm gonna go on Grok. Grok will tell me.
Yeah, you would. I'd probably need to look that up as well. I can't remember what they used to.
I can't remember. Like I said, usually it's found as a pool water treatment chemical.
CR says activated charcoal or carbon has a lot of surface area.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it goes back to activated carbon filters or filters. They're not generally purifiers, so they're not removing most bacteria, viruses, parasites, salts, heavy metals, anything like that.
Yeah.
They're just an effective filter.
Yeah. If you need to filtrate heavy metals or things like that, you need a specialized water filter for that.
I mean, there's other things you can use as well with like UV light treatment and things that I've seen people
Yeah.
using that, which
Yeah,
is quite effective.
UV is mostly for viruses and bacteria.
Yeah. I've even seen a system that uses a tiny amount of salt, and you add water to the salt, and then there's a button that you literally press, and it causes an electrical reaction.
Bleach is. Bleach is a
Yeah,
salt.
you're basically making bleach from salt itself. I forget the name of the company. I would have to look it up here and then post a link to it. But there's actually a device you can buy where just with table salt, you add a little bit of table salt and a little bit of water to this. You press a button, and it basically makes bleach for you. And you can use a power bank to charge this thing up. It's a fantastic prepper tool to have. I plan on getting one actually at some point if I can remember what it's called.
You are right, Alan. You are right. Coconut shells is the most common high quality medical food grade. Yeah, it's the most common for but like got also hardwood. It's like oak, because I'm aware of oak being used. Oak, beechwood, or pine.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you can get charcoal carbon from just about anything. But I know the coconut husks are particularly effective. I can't remember.
Whatever you do, if you plan on making your own charcoal, do not use pressure treated or any sort of treated lumber. Bad idea.
Yeah, I'd avoid coal as well, because I know you can get it from coal, but I would avoid that, to be honest. I suppose pressure treated lumber would just be a lot of toxins in there.
Yeah. There's a lot of chemicals. Don't use that. Don't even be using creosote. You want to give yourself some cancer.
Yeah, I avoid all that. Even, well, like I'll show you. This is for the. Okay, you see those two red containers right there?
Yeah.
Those are full of wood that's already split, ready for a paint can stove. Those two containers. And I don't even use pressurized wood for fuel. Get that shit away from me, man.
You're not supposed to be burning pressure treated or freaking creosote treated lumber anyway.
No. That's a good way of getting some kind of god awful knows what,
Yeah. I sometimes see people talking about they have wood burning stoves in their house, and they say, "Oh, look, I got this pile of wood from my work. It's great." And you look at it, you're like, "Yeah, I wouldn't be burning that. You're breathing that crap in. That's it's waste wood for a reason." It's a lot of pallets. You get these blue colored pallets over here that are for food grade pallets and things, but that's because they're sterilized and they add something to it. And there's, I don't fancy the idea of breathing that in.
Now, the only thing I do with my fuel that's already cut up for a paint can stove is some of it I soaked it in paraffin wax.
Yeah,
that's for
getting it to take a flame.
Right, and you guys know the Northwest here, it rains all the time. If part of my roof comes off and I got a roof compromised, I still am going to be able to start a fire. And
show us all your witchcraft sticks hanging from your ceiling.
Oh, I got most of those processed into containers, but here we go. Yeah, these are all paraffin waxed. They're ready for. Those are actually fire starters hanging up there. I got. I took all those.
On.
Yeah, I took all those sticks and wrapped them up with other popsicle sticks and wood and different combustible materials, but those are just hanging right there, ready to use. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I
you
got
used to
most
have
of
a
those
hell of a-
already dealt with. You know, when I sit here at night, and I can't sit still, guys. I'm
Yeah.
active. I'm always doing something. You know, just one of my personality traits is building, improving, doing something. Like right now, while we're talking, you know what? I came up with a process to take almost every day. We got about that much leftover rice almost every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So uh, I know it's not landslides or whatever, but I'm putting it into between parchment paper and crushing it down. And I took the wife's little kitchen stove, the little oven out of her kitchen. I replaced it with a better one, but I got everything set up to where I make the sticky, nasty, hard to handle rice into something I can pick up and drop in my blender. But that's my life. That's the shit I do. Process improvement, you know, all that. That's me. You know, I never sit still. I can't.
I think the continuously tinkering and refining your own preps is just
You bet.
it's a good thing to
Yeah.
do. It's a good thing to always have. I'm always
Always.
tweaking and tinkering my own stuff, my own little
Should.
kits and things like that. And
Mhm.
it's not because I really have to, but at least it keeps your mind in the zone of what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, and it refreshes
Mhm.
what it is, what you're doing and why you're doing it. So it's a good thing to do now and again.
Yeah.
Hey, Shadow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bail out for a little bit.
Yeah.
If you're still streaming an hour from now, I'll come back and join you again. I've got my boss and his wife, they're out of town, and since I'm not working right now because I'm restricted from being able to work because of the broken wrist.
Yeah.
I gotta go walk his dog. So I've
Okay,
told
no
my
problem.
times of the day. So I'll be back, guys.
Catch you in a bit.
All right, man. Yeah, good to talk to you again. In case we don't run into each other for a while.
Well, you better start doing a live
Yep.
stream here pretty
Here.
soon because I've been looking forward every Sunday night. And I don't see any.
Oh, how about next week? Let's count on next week. Not
All right.
this Sunday, but the one after. Yeah, because
Okay.
I haven't done a live for a while. You know, I just
Yeah,
haven't
because
felt
I've been
it.
missing the part talk with Mark, and Mark hasn't been on either. So, I have to call him up on the phone. Actually, I'm gonna tell Mark, hey, I'm gonna tell Mark, hey, text you my phone number, and you call me whenever. Okay, I'm gonna be out of work until September anyway. So,
Okay.
all right.
Well, you tell that freaking raccoon to stay the hell out of my backyard.
And you won't send off any A10 warthogs after him either. All right. Okay, guys.
All right.
Later.
Yeah, I think see because originally we were talking about canyons and things like that.
Yeah.
It does remind me of camp placement. If you're looking to build a campsite somewhere, you have to understand the landscape that you're in. And something I see a lot of people do, particularly in my part of the world anyway, is they're always looking for nice flat ground. And because there's lots of heather and weeds and things growing everywhere, it's quite difficult to find sometimes. But some areas that you do tend to find flattish ground is near riverbeds. So if the riverbed is dry, people will think there's a perfect place to build a tent. Or they'll see a nice pebbly beach or a nice sandy embankment and they think that's a good place to set up camp. These are terrible places to set up camp.
Yes, they are.
Truly terrible. And I admit I am guilty. I've occasionally done it myself just out of, I've took a bit of a risk and just did it anyway. But I mean, for one, obviously there's a flood risk, which is what we're talking about here. So if you're in a canyon or you're near a dry riverbed, even though it looks perfectly flat, do not build your camp there because it could become a raging torrent in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing being as well, I don't know why people like to do this, is that they like to pitch their tents on beaches. Beaches are terrible places to pitch tents. One, the sand fleas. Two, sand gets everywhere, right?
Yeah.
It destroys fabric and materials, and it's abrasive and it's nasty. It's also got no shade, no shelter, and it blows around and it's nasty and horrible. But the thing that I always remember as well is, for the most part, most of the sand or most of the pebble that wash that you see at the side of beaches or streams, they're only there because water has took them there at some point.
Yeah.
Right. So if water has carried those pebbles to that place, then you want to be avoiding that at all costs. I mean, yeah, granted, you will get sand dunes and stuff where wind has taken the sand there and it's not the water that's did it. But for the most part, if you're near a riverbed, it's probably because it's a riverbed for a reason, even if it's been dry for a very long time, because you never know. Even if that riverbed's been dry for 10 years, you might be the unlucky bastard like me that would probably camp there, and suddenly there's a thunderstorm 20 miles away that floods it for the first time in 10 years.
Yeah.
That's the kind of luck I have when I'm in these kind of places. Canyons as well. See, the thing about canyons, I mean, this is not so much a case in the UK, but definitely in the United States and some places in Europe. Some of these canyons they're not only are they deep, but they have very flat, smooth walls, so you can't climb out of them easily. So there's no escape route.
Mhm.
So you've got to think to yourself, okay, I want to go canyoning. I want to, here's a nice canyon. I've seen loads of YouTube videos about it, and it zigzags for a few miles. You've got to ask yourself the question, but if it suddenly rains and flooding takes place, how do I get out of this canyon? And how do I do it quickly? Do I have the physical ability to run back to where I was at? Can I climb the wall of this canyon? What's the safest way of doing it? And you have to make an action plan of what it is you plan on doing.
Climbing a canyon wall like that, that is difficult. And you have at least 60 seconds on you to climb that thing. And if you're not used to climb like that, oh man, you're screwed.
I tell you, some of them are super smooth. I mean, granted, you'll get these badass climbers that can climb up, a glass wall, but most people can't climb nothing unless it's, got nice big handholds and stuff. And these canyons, because water has flowed through them so often, they're completely smooth. That's why they're smooth. And, you can't climb out of there. Animals get caught in these things all the time. And, something I've noticed from my travels in desert regions is just how often I see dead animals. And a lot of those animals haven't died from dehydration or something. They've died in water. And they've washed down some sort of like, a stream or something like that, because I've been to many deserts in my life, and most of them have like roads that go over the top of them, like an overpass, and you can walk under the overpass. And almost every time I go under an overpass in a desert area, I find a skeleton of some sort, of an animal, like a sheep or a goat or something. And I can pretty much guarantee it's probably drowned. It hasn't just went under there for shade and died. Drowning is a big hazard in desert regions. More people die in deserts from drowning than they do from dehydration.
I believe it. Yeah, but
a lot of people
you look at it.
Believe that.
Canyon camping is a very bad idea. Okay, maybe if it's just you and your buddy, you might have a chance to be able to get away from a flash flood. If you've got your kids with you, now what are you going to do? Because you can't leave your kids behind. You can't leave your wife behind.
No.
I mean, now you compounded the life loss from just one or two people to three or four. Because I'm not going to leave my kids. I'm going to do anything I can to get them out, get them up to high ground. Yeah, canyon camping or right next to a river, don't do it. Just don't do it. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't recommend it.
There was also, I remember seeing in the news, I think we've spoke about it on here before as well, that campsite in the US that was hit by the flash flood and killed a lot of kids.
I remember that.
That wasn't that long ago. What was that, last year before?
Just a few years ago.
And it actually happened before. That's the thing. Because I remember we were watching it in the news, and it was saying, it was a freak accident. Nobody could have forecast it. All these kids drowned in this flash flood on like a summer camp. And I remember thinking, surely somebody did a risk assessment of the river there. And then I dug into it a little bit deeper, and it turns out it actually happened before in the exact same place years before.
I remember that.
To me, people have got to realise that if the area has been prone to flooding in the past, it will almost certainly flood in the future. Almost
That's
certainly.
fact, Alan. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
You
fact.
know,
That's a
and
fact.
that's why you have to like forward think. That's why you have to take a look at the past and then plan for the future.
Yeah.
And that includes, just if you live in a place that's flood prone, or
Yeah.
any other hazard. It doesn't just matter. We're talking about flooding here and flash flooding, but if you live in Hurricane Tornado Valley, prepare for tornadoes.
That's right.
It makes bloody sense.
That's
if
right,
you
CR.
if you live in a place where you're prone to water shortages or power cuts, then prep for those things first above all else, and prioritize those things.
I'll give you an example of like that camp that they should have. The state should have came in and took away their ability to do business and put a lock on the gate. You're done. But because of overseas there, they were developing an area that was known to be a floodplain.
Yeah.
But because of political corruption, money changing hands, they issued out building permits and they built homes. And these folks went in there and bought homes. And of course, if it's flooded there once before, it was listed on the maps, floodplain, don't build there. But because of money, they developed it, and a couple of years later, wham, just took it all right out. So shit like that happens, man. Because and here's the person buying the home and the property, they don't know anything about it, and then there goes everything you've just put all your whole life's work into, swept downstream.
Yeah.
Political corruption plays into that kind of shit, man.
Yeah.
I just quickly had a look there. It was called Camp Mystic or Mystique in Texas, and it says here on Wikipedia, the camp was severely damaged in July 2025, Central Texas, by flash flood. 28 people from the camp died, all children, by the way, pretty much, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, 25 of the 28 were children. It was a girls' camp.
Yeah.
And by the looks of it, just sort of scanning over some of the history news reports here, this shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody. That camp was founded in 1926 and has flooded a dozen times over the years. It flooded in 1932, it flooded in 1937, it flooded in 1934, it flooded 1942. There was a 10-day period where the entire camp flooded back in the 40s. It's floods all the time. So why there's still a camp there, I don't know. Just move it to somewhere where it's safer.
Yeah.
But it looks like corruption. It looks like all sorts of corruption going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Political connections and money change in hand. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah. The state should have came in there with a bulldozer and wiped out the road to going in there and locked it up. That's a shame. But in order to get change through government, you got to have loss of life or major loss of property. That's the only way you get change.
Yeah. I tell you, you can imagine how devastating it was. It says here, at the time the flood took place in 2025, there was 108 people on the camp, and 28 of them are now dead.
Oh,
so that's a huge percentage of the people there got killed, and everybody else, of course, had to be evacuated.
That's awful, man.
Yeah, that's awful. I agree.
Do you think that could happen up around CR's area?
CR says it can flood here in Canada too.
Oh, good. Thank God.
I tell you, Bob, you joke, but those Canadians, they're plotting something. They're plotting something. I know
it. Don't turn your back.
It's not the Chinese you guys need to worry about, or the Russians. It's the Canadians.
Watch them Canadians, man. Watch them close. I like Canadians.
I've never been to Canada. I'd love to visit Canada. There's so many places, wilderness places, environments I'd love to see there. It'd be great.
I've only been to like Vancouver Island. I haven't been all over the country, but I've noticed that the mentality of the Canadian people is still very much like a early on here in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to help each other. That's it. You know, they still have that mentality up
Yeah.
there, sharing, giving people. That I grew up with a lot of Canadians here, and I've been to Canada a couple of times, but I like the Canadians because of that. They won't let
they're famously nice, aren't they? They're kind of famously generally nice.
And they'll share their food with you if you're stranded. They'll help you, you know, where there's other countries that I've been to, they just can't. They can't help you. You're out, you know. But decent people, all of them that I've ever known.
Most of my knowledge of Canada comes from South Park. so all I know is they have like heads that sort of like
they bobble like
South Park.
They
mean
call
that sitcom? Oh,
I'm not your buddy guy. I'm not your guy, buddy.
Yeah. I love that song they sang. That's stuck in my head. Blame Canada. Blame. It's not really a country anyway.
Aren't they the guys that write South Park? They are Canadian, aren't they? They're not even.
I
American.
heard.
I think they're Canadian. Yeah, they live. I think they live in the US, but you know that Trey Parker and the other guy. Yeah, hilarious.
Yeah, I've heard that they had Canadian writers and producers. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm sure the main guys are Canadian.
Probably. Yeah, but all the Canadians I've ever known are I throw shit at them a little bit, but they throw it back at us Americans too. So you know,
it goes back and forth.
It does, but in honesty, you know, if you're up in Canada and you get stranded alongside the road, your folks will help you. You know.
I think I'd quite like to visit the western side of Canada because that's where all of the kind of forests and things are, the big forests. You know, that I'd like to see. You know, we don't have that kind of ecology in Europe anymore. It's long gone. It's long been deforested and things like that. You get some bits of it, I think, in like California and places, but you know, most of it's kind of in Canada and those kind of maybe Alaska as well, probably. But that's quite far north. You know, if you sort of Mears Island and places like that.
CR, Bob's crap. The CR filter. Washington State is much like that still. You know, we've got on the Pacific the coast along Puget Sound is developed to an extent, but most of this state is still open wilderness. You know, but
it's harder and harder for me to find genuine wilderness. You know, even in Europe, it's the population is just growing constantly, so it's harder and harder to find genuine wilderness nowadays.
Well, what I noticed flying over Canada a couple of times, we landed in England and then transferred to Rome or wherever we were going. Man, that country is undeveloped, dude. I mean, you can fly for hours in the central part of Canada, going over Hudson's Bay, approaching Hudson's Bay. Baby, there ain't no rail lines. There's no roads. There is absolutely no developments out there.
Yeah.
So wow. I mean, we're flying for hours and hours and hours going over Canada. If you want to live in remote, go to Canada. You'll find it there. You will find remote in Canada.
Well, it's not a very big population, is it, for the size of the country? I mean, the country's enormous, and yet the population, I don't know what the population of Canada is, but I imagine it's very small.
Right. Food Forest says, British Columbia is the last of the wilds. Yeah, I've been to British Columbia several times. It's beautiful up there, but get used to the rain because that's part of it. All those trees that grow up there, they need rain. And
41.5 million people in
Okay.
Canada.
Yeah.
But the UK is a very small country. We have 70 million people.
Mhm.
So it's
Oh, yeah.
what US about 340, 350 million, somewhere around that. So yeah, very small population for such a large country.
From what I've seen of Europe by being there a few times is very fragile. Um, I mean, not insulting, but the UK cannot even feed its own population.
Oh,
You
that's
guys
been the
just
case. That's been the
for
case for a long
centuries.
time. That's been the
Yeah,
case for a very
that's
long
why
time.
that's why your ancestors went abroad and
Yeah.
started building ships and stuff. And that's what I mean. It's kind of fragile because if you've lost transportation, just like Germany tried in World War One and World War II to cut the UK off from its shipping lanes.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a
it's
nasty situation.
it's the siege
Mhm.
mentality. That's what it
Yes.
is. It's the siege
Mhm.
mentality. So the UK is uniquely protected because, of course, we're an island.
Mhm.
The UK hasn't been invaded in 1,000 years, and even back then, when in 1066, when it last happened, we kind of
Yeah.
invited it, so it wasn't a real invasion. But
Mm.
the con of that, like you say, is like the Germans realised all we have to do is cut off their shipping. They'll starve, and that's what they tried to do. They tried to
Came
starve us out, and if it
came
wasn't
close.
for shipping coming from the US and Canada, of course, Britain would have long since
The New
ran out
World.
of supplies. And
I noticed that in Italy also. Italy is pretty arid. There is farmland there, but it's hot and it's dry.
Mhm.
So
Oh
that's
yeah,
fragile also. Same with Spain, hot
Mhm.
and dry.
Well,
So
ironically, the most fertile parts of Europe are also some of the most hostile, like Ukraine, for example.
yes,
Ukraine, that's where a lot of the grain and stuff comes from because it's
yes.
perfect growing conditions for that.
Hmm.
And central parts of Europe, like Germany, they have fantastic advantages of what they can produce, and because they're geographically placed in such a fertile area. But because they're right in the middle of Europe, of course, they're under attack all of the time. Which is, if you look at the history of Europe, places like that are in continuous conflict of some
Yes.
description.
Same with France. It's got great fertile soil.
yeah.
They can grow a lot of crops there, be pretty self-sustaining, but all their neighbors want. They always want what neighbors always want what you have.
Well, it's
Oh,
funny because I mean the UK spent almost the entirety of the 20th century worrying about the Germans, and I
yeah.
think they spent almost
Right.
the entirety of the 19th century worrying about the French. you know, it's just that's just the history of Europe, and obviously after the Second World War, Europe is much more joined up now.
Yeah. Yeah.
As more, and some people wanted to be like a united Europe.
Hmm.
That's gets into politics then, but a United States of Europe would be a very powerful country.
Yeah. Mhm.
But plenty of us would rather not be in that kind of situation.
I understand. You don't
Uh,
want somebody else telling you how to live.
Not well. That somebody's always telling you how to live. It just how many degrees away from that,
Right.
away from you, do you want that to be? I
I
mean,
agree.
somewhere like the
Yeah.
United States is the US is almost as big as Europe. So you could make the argument: why should somebody in Washington D.C. make a decision about somebody who lives in, what would be furthest away from Washington D.C.? Somewhere
Hawaii,
Hawaii. What? Yeah.
Alaska.
Why
Yeah,
would
Alaska.
why would somebody in Alaska care about what somebody in Washington said? And
Hmm.
eventually you just have to accept it. Well, if you want a large country, then there has to be a centralized point of government, and then you can
Yeah.
devolve it out. We call it devolution or
Hmm.
devolution in the UK. In America, you guys would be federalization, which is a similar sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, but I mean, it's kind of linked to what we're talking about as well, because
Yeah.
flash flooding and things like that is largely to do with. I mean, there's a natural element to it where it's just part of nature. It's just something that happens. It rains a lot, suddenly you get a flood. But engineering of the landscape to a point where it's unnatural, and we're trying to sustain a large population in an area that doesn't otherwise sustain that large kind of population,
Right.
is when it becomes a problem. I mean, a flash flood shouldn't be a problem for most people ever. But if you start crowding people around waterways and coastlines, then it becomes more of a problem. It's kind of like earthquakes. I remember somebody once saying to me, earthquakes from a natural point of view aren't deadly. Nobody should ever die in an earthquake. Earthquakes don't kill people. Buildings falling on top of people is what kills people.
Power lines too. Yeah.
Yeah, and think man-made things falling on you is what kills people generally.
Yeah.
If you were a Native American living, on the San Andreas Fault or whatever, and it happened, what's going to happen? These tent falls on them. It's not as deadly as it otherwise should be. Tsunamis aside, and it's the same for flash flooding. And the more urbanized we become, the more we concrete our landscape, and we funnel the water into channels, and we channel that water into unnatural places, and we become more vulnerable.
Let me see. Later evil. Yeah, that's the difficulty with management. And like I said, here in the States anyway, the states and federal, they don't really act on anything until after there's a loss of life.
Yeah, it's the same here. It's the same here.
That's
corruption. Yeah. They don't want to spend a penny until they're being seen that they have to do it. It's kind of it's like flood defenses has always been a hot topic in this part of the world, because it affects a lot of people, but it only affects them at certain periods of a year usually, and very sporadically. So a town might be flooded 3 or 4 times in a decade, and the people in that town demand the government do something about, put in some flood prevention barriers. But the government says, wait a minute, it will cost us X amount of millions to do this, but it only costs X amount of millions to repair the damage. That's how they do the calculation.
Right.
Over a 10-year period, And you see it all the time. You see it with everything. I mean, you see it with why the UK is very underprepared for bad snow, for example. If it snows just a foot in the UK, our whole country comes to a grinding halt. And people will always say, I don't understand why that's the case. If you look at somewhere like Canada, it snows there all the time and they don't come to a halt. Why is that? Well, because they have infrastructure, because it's predictable. So they have snow plows and trains that can handle that, and railway lines that are, built with that in mind, and they have workers that specialize in that kind of stuff. Whereas we have bad snow once every 15 years or something. So nobody's going to invest money into all the things you would need to sort of get through a bad snowy season, because there's no point in it, because you're not going to see it for 10 years. And then when it does happen, it causes a lot of people a lot of problems. And that's why it's important for people to prepare for those kind of things ahead of time, because like I think you've said this in the past before, Bob, nobody's coming to help you when it really matters. The government is not there. When you really need it, when you really need them, they're not there.
And like Dior's there, he's a truck driver. He delivers food. Sweden is far more prepared for winter snow than we are here in Seattle area. So it does paralyze and slow down so many things immediately. Put away a few days of food and water. Do it. No matter who's listening right now. I don't know who. But put away a few days of food and water and keep it safe. And food, I'm going to go get some lunch. It's 1:30 and I'm hungry. So I'm actually going to have to
Bob,
cook
get something to eat. So
my wife isn't home, and I'm going to have to go cook something. Damn it.
Yeah.
I've not had
complain to your missus later.
I will. She's going to hear about it. I'll tell you. Cuba is waiting for her. I'm sending my wife to Cuba.
All I've done is sit here and drink bottles of beer. I haven't actually had much to eat myself, so I should probably. And it's bloody roasting here. I'm sweating like hell because it's 24 degrees, I think, now in this room.
Oh my God.
But, yeah.
You and Shadow are going to melt into big pools of water any minute now.
We're just not used to it. I mean, again, it's underprepared. These houses are just not built for even the warmest of days. They're designed to keep the heat in. not the other way around. So
Correct.
even with blackout
Yeah,
curtains and stuff,
it's the same with
hard.
our buildings here as well. It's built to keep the heat in.
Mm-hmm.
So my apartment on summertime, it gets 33 degrees Celsius in the apartment.
Yeah, easily.
You're floating away.
Yeah, she's in the side chat there watching you, Bob, and watch some Canadians, man. Watch them.
They're plotting
All right. Peace out, guys. God bless everybody.
Catch you later, Bob.
Catch you later.
Later.
Oh, Lord. "33 degrees Celsius is about 93 Fahrenheit. It's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I like the heat. I just don't like it in a house. You know, I like warm weather, but I can't sleep in anything above sort of 22, 23 degrees Celsius. Then it gets kind of too warm for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally I like the heat. I've always said I'd like to be in a hot country. I'd like to move to a hot country, but hot countries have air conditioning and outdoor blinds and areas, shaded areas and things like that. Not like here where it's, this house was built in the ferries and it's got big windows and lots of insulation, and it was designed to keep the heat in as much as possible. So it's not ideal.
I prefer smaller windows because it's better.
Yeah, I mean the windows in this house are very big. They're quite large.
Yeah, the same for my apartment. Our windows here are pretty big too.
Yeah, and it just becomes like a greenhouse.
I don't really like it.
It becomes like a greenhouse, even if you have blackout blinds, that they don't always work because the heat is still coming through the glass. It heats up the curtain and the air around the curtain, and then it traps it inside the room. And that's why, if you don't have air conditioning or anything like that, there's no way of getting that air out. You have to wait till the temperature drops a lot outside and then open a window and hope that you can sort of like blow some of the air out that way by opening a couple of windows or something.
Yeah, I'm sweating. That's why I drink a lot. I sweat constantly. It's so annoying. I hate it.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. Quite kind of sweaty as well, especially in look at this. Just sitting here, sweating like hell. Just seeing if there's any other questions or anything in the comments. There doesn't seem to be much in the way of questions.
No, it's mostly comments on the degrees, the temperatures.
Yeah. Has anybody got any questions? If you've got any questions, fire them in the chat, and we'll see what our opinions of them are. About anything, really. I'm open to any question. If it's in my area of kind of understanding, I'm mostly a bit of an idiot when it comes to everything else. Other than wilderness camping and survival-y type stuff, I don't really know much.
CR says has a question. Dry bags.
Yes. What's the question?
That's the question actually. Very short question. Dry bags.
Well,
good quality.
I use
quality
a lot of
dry bags.
Yeah, I use a lot of dry bags. The main thing that I use a dry bag for is my sleep system when I'm camping. So I'll carry a sleeping bag, and I'll put the sleeping bag inside a bivy bag usually, and then I push the entire system into a dry bag, a roll top dry bag. And the ones I've got a vent on the bottom where you can undo the vent, and you roll the air out of it and you push it down, and then you plug the vent back in, and then you seal it up. It's the one item that I think if you're going to use a dry bag, you absolutely need to use it for your sleep system. The idea being that even if your entire backpack falls in water, at least the one thing that's very hard to dry.
Yeah, and your first aid kit is good to have in a dry bag too.
Yeah. I think
No, not Norway should not win. We should.
Here's the
Oh,
one
yeah.
that I recommend for a sleep system. So you can see it's got this vent, and what
Yeah.
that allows you to remove a lot of the air out of the bag itself. So you can really get an almost vacuum type seal when it comes to these kind of bags.
That's a nice bag.
Yeah, this is quite a good one because this one is good enough for a winter sleep system. The sizes they're heavier though. That's the thing. I mean, if you start putting everything into a dry bag, you suddenly
Yeah.
realize that your pack weight gets pretty heavy. Generally, you don't really need anything above sort of 35 liters when
Yeah.
it comes to a dry bag, but that's the one thing I'll use that for. And most of the other things that I tend to have in my gear, you can get away with the thin, lightweight type dry bags. You know, I've got a bunch of them lying around, but I don't look to overly waterproof everything because that just adds weight and you can actually end up trapping a lot of condensation and moisture in there.
Yeah.
A lot of things are water-ish proof anyway when it comes to general rain and stuff like that. But I've also seen for anybody who's interested, you can actually get a large oversized thin dry bag, about 50 liters, like a roll top bag. And what you do is if you think you have to cross a river or something that involves you actually doing a bit of swimming, you put your entire bag into the dry bag and then you roll the dry bag up deliberately with a bit of air in it. Just 3 rolls is enough to keep the air in, and then you seal it and it becomes like a raft and you can actually hold on to it and swim across a river, which I don't recommend doing that in a flash flood type situation, but that's a way of crossing water with your bag while keeping everything safe, and you can just use one dry bag for that.
I think we covered the most of the thing today, so I think it's time to wrap things up because I can't come up with anything else. So
I think we've probably covered just about every basis when it comes to the flash flooding, but for most of what we talk about, like I always say, it's really about proactively thinking about the hazard ahead of time and thinking about what you would do. If that's a possible hazard, think ahead of time what you can do to mitigate against becoming a victim of it. What's your escape plan? What's your plan to self-rescue? Is it likely? Think about all these what ifs and plan accordingly to that. But if you can possibly avoid areas of flash flood, then do it. But that's not always possible. But they're certainly survivable, and they shouldn't be as dangerous as they are. But never underestimate them. I think that's probably all I would have to say when it comes to flash flooding. So other than that, thank you for having me on, Shadow. It's been great again. And it's been a good conversation.
Yeah, it has been a really good conversation, actually. Yeah. I will see you next week, same time, same channel. And by the way, I work my last week next week, and then I have my vacation. So that will be really nice. So stay safe, take care, and remember, be part of the solution, not the problem.